Hello. No worries. Oh, fuck. Wait, hold on. I can't hear anything. Is this on me? Hold on. I don't know if I can hear anything.
That's on me.
Oh, that is you. I can hear you now.
Yeah, it's been so long since I've done this. Oh, hi everybody. This is an impromptu live stream, like very last minute. I just relocated, want to make sure my internet can handle it. Decided to hang out with Stax.
How's it going?
Always
As always.
the wrong decision. No, I'm saying that's always the wrong decision because
right.
Exceptionally unlikable.
True. I'm just here for the eye candy, as always.
Is that me or is that Econoboi who will be joining us?
Well, everyone likes that big glowing E that's just vibrating with audio.
That's what
everyone's really into.
So, I mentioned, I'm like, listen, given all like the canvassing political operations that, Progressive Victory is going to be doing this year, or Progress Libs or whatever, like, what you should do that, Econoboi, you should come out. And I was like, if it makes you feel any better, we have very creative people. If he doesn't want to reveal his face, like a giant E mask to conceal himself.
Yeah.
Let's see. What's up, people?
How you doing, man?
Let's see. Let's look at some of the. Hi, Josiah. Hi, Ed. Eric says showtime. Hi, Eric. Y9 Power. Let's go. Vincent Mashi, which makes me think I don't know. I don't
Italian.
know why it's like it's Italian.
It's a little Italian. Mashi.
Not going to miss this. I was just listening to Glenn Kirshner. Glenn Kirshner is the best. One day, I want Pisco to be my Glenn Kirshner, my like legal analyst or whatever, because he's so smart. Pisco's so smart.
Facts.
So we're going to be doing this for like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, something like this. It's not going to be like a 3-hour thing.
And we'll see how long we can stand each other.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Did you all hear that? Oh, that was in my ear. Okay. I'm trying to prep the Don Lemon thing.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything.
Am I hallucinating? That happened, didn't it? That conversation with Brian Tyler Cohen, David Pakman, and Jen Kuger. There it is. I found it. Yeah. So that's what we're going to be doing as a conceit. We're going to be watching and reviewing that. Hi, Staxioms guy, says Ed Livewire.
Hello, Ed Livewire guy.
Old Scotty, my basketball buddy. Do it live.
We're doing it live.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
It was.
It's like that was like
I'll write the thing and we'll do it live.
It's like 15 years old and it still is not old.
What's up, Econoboi?
Hey guys, yeah, sorry. I thought I thought for some reason I thought the restream link was like the link to the restream thing.
Oh my god, did we lose him?
No, I think he's still there.
No, he just froze. Like, because
it's hard to tell when he freezes.
But not the link to the room.
All right, say something now.
I'm here now.
Yeah, you're back. You're back. Say something.
I was momentarily frozen. Goodness, that never happens. Unbelievable.
That was. You went. And the thing is, you have such an expressive face. We could barely tell.
It's my looks that really get me by on this platform.
Yeah.
So.
100%, I believe it.
Yeah.
It's definitely like you're not very good with like economic stuff, right? Like that's not your area of expertise, right? You don't know anything about the economy. That was it.
The joke is that he does know.
I think listen, you shut up. He froze.
Do you guys get it?
He's laughing. Get it? He's laughing so hard right now. That E is going like
that's
uppercase, lowercase,
works.
Uppercase, lowercase. He just happened to freeze.
Honestly, everyone says that comedy is so difficult. You just say the opposite of what you mean, and then that is what's funny.
God,
Josiah, you're
I'm just gonna
good at humor.
I'm just gonna say,
see,
your fiance still has time to make a different decision.
True, I'm getting married in 2 weeks, baby.
Yeah.
Oh,
to a woman of questionable standards No, listen,
Yeah,
she could do
facts.
way better. All right.
No one
I'm
is
just saying.
questioning that.
Yeah.
Like 100%.
Let's see.
She is infinitely smarter than me.
She has a better personality too. There's no question about that either.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. So listen, let's jump into this real quick instead of just ragging on and Econoboi, can you keep talking so I know you're not freezing?
Yeah, I'm here. I think I'm good. I don't know what's up with my internet. Who knows?
Let me what happens when I do this? Can you all talk and hear an echo?
I do hear an echo.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Then we're going to do a different thing. All right. It's been so long since I've done this, okay?
It's legitimately probably happened, like, I would say at least a dozen times.
Stop it. Shut up. I don't like you. God, you're my least favorite person. All right. What about this?
I'm trying it. Oh, I can't hear an echo.
Okay.
I do not hear an echo.
Do you hear the audio when I play it?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So, folks, do you mind if we put this on 1.25 speed? Destiny's not in it, so I feel like this is going to be...
Nice.
Yeah.
1.5 speed, or we're not even playing for keeps. All right.
That's true.
Oh my God.
Speaking of my fiance, she's dyslexic, so she can't really read, but she listens to stuff at 3 times speed. She gets a separate app.
She can't
listen to it. Yeah, she can't read well. But she listens, she does dyslexia and she goes 3 times speed, and you just watch her read. She just closes her eyes and just like the processing power is like, it's so fast.
I feel like just closing her eyes and trying to process is going to be the entire state of your marriage. Basically, she's just like, what the hell have I done?
Nice.
What have I done? Okay, enough about, again, how she lost a bet, clearly, or Make-A-Wish Foundation is really coming through for you. So for context, folks, again, we're trying to test my streaming capabilities since I moved to this new location, and we are going to live react to a 2 or 3 day old debate between Don Lemon, David Pakman, Brian Tyler Cohen, and Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks. We're going to dive in, and if at any point either of you want to jump in, I will pause it as soon as you start to talk.
All right.
And here we are. I don't know if to call you guys like Don's Angels. I don't know. There's something. I'm not sure. But Cenk, Brian, David, welcome to the program. If the online left had a joint chiefs of staff, I think it would probably be you three. And so with all that's going on, I couldn't think of a better time and a better group of people to talk about all of these issues, especially coming up to the election. So thank you all for joining. I appreciate it. And thank you for welcoming me into this new streaming world and helping me out. David, I'm going to start with you, okay? Because I want to open with you because I want to talk about the Arizona Supreme Court recently revived this 160-year-old total ban on abortions there. Arizona Republicans like Carrie Lake are already distancing themselves from it. Do you think, David, that abortion is going to be the issue that sinks the right wing in this election?
It has that potential. I think it's a little early, and we can make grand predictions, but I think it's hard to say that it will be the issue. But this really is potentially a problem. It's all completely predictable. I mean, you go back to the end of 2015, lots of folks, without patting anybody on the back necessarily, were saying the path here is if Trump wins, he gets 2 or 3 Supreme Court justices at the first opportunity. They will overturn Roe v. Wade. Antiquated laws that are still on the books in many states will then all of a sudden be at the forefront. And next thing you know, you have laws. We said 1964, many of us were thinking this is an 1864 law. Next thing you know, those are the laws people have to contend with. And it's leaving the evangelical right furious. Mike Pence putting out this very critical tweet the other day. It's also leaving folks who are in the majority who think abortion should be legal in most cases angry. So it has the potential to be a real problem.
Well, the thing is, as you said, you can't really be half in and half out. I mean, you can't, just sort of leave it up to the states. You can't really be half in and half out when it comes to abortion.
I mean, listen, you can claim to be, but the problem is that the majority of the country now actually doesn't really want that. They're in theory open to states' rights until what states want are unless it's no longer convenient to them.
I think it is important, as I'm sure you all are aware, that even in very red states like Kansas and Kentucky, when there have been ballot referenda on abortions, they've not gone well for Republicans. So I think David has a point here that politically this is a loser, even if you leave it as a quote unquote issue.
It's gone so badly for Republicans that Florida voted to increase the threshold to pass a referenda to 60%, and the West Virginia governor prevented a referenda from even happening, right? Because even in a state like West Virginia, they don't think that 12-year-old rape victims should be forced to, have children, right? Which is a pretty reasonable stance for, the average conservative to take. But I mean, unfortunately, this is one where the liberals were right. All the fear mongering of like, look, if Trump wins in 2016, if you sit this one out, the Supreme Court could be up for grabs. And it was pretty much a worst case scenario. He ended up getting the essentially the 2 appointments almost right off the jump within the first couple of years. But then RBG died, right? And so she dies literally a couple months before he leaves office. And well, that's what we end up with. We end up with a radical Supreme Court that strips the rights of women across the country, basically. So,
Stax, I don't want to interrupt. Is there anything you want to add to that? Because I've got more to say.
Yeah, 100%. The only thing is that I find it so weird because I thought the Republicans made it clear that you can't elect a Supreme Court justice in the 4th year. That's what I thought.
That's true.
Rules. I'm confused.
That is true.
Are they hypocrites or?
Yeah, I don't.
They found a way. It turns out.
Yeah, you got to understand. They had their fingers crossed when they said that. What they really meant was you can't confirm a judicial appointee to the Supreme Court during an election year during a waning gibbous moon the night before. Okay, that's the fine print that you didn't read, you moron. Obviously.
My fault.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Also, when the president's black, you forgot that part.
Exactly.
That's honestly
real.
Honestly, that's the real one right there. I am curious. So, Econoboi, you said, I didn't realize this, that Florida raised the threshold like Ohio tried to do instead of like just a simple majority to get a constitutional amendment, or excuse me, the referendum. It's got to go to 60%.
Yeah, so mega ironically, let's say, they passed a referenda in Florida with 57% of the vote, which said that our new threshold is now 60%. So the threshold vote only required a majority to raise it. So kind of an ironic circumstance. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, now referendums in Florida require 60%. And to be fair, I mean, I think that this is one of those things, like, it could actually play against the conservative cause in Florida, because if you look at the polling, like, the abortion issue in Florida is right at 60%. Like, it could actually cause a lot more people to be motivated to go out, because it's very clear that a majority in pretty much every state is going to vote for a significantly more liberalized, abortion regulatory state than the, basically what the Supreme Court has delved down in these old laws that are getting put in. But 60% is relatively questionable. So it could actually lead to more motivation for Democrats to come out and, liberal Republicans to come out and really, at the very least on that single issue, voice their support for, an abortion protection.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize, though, that the threshold was raised. Ohio Republicans tried to play dirty pool like that because they knew they were going to lose if it was down to a simple majority. But they kind of, that referendum, it had to go to a referendum first for them to raise the threshold, right? So people had to vote like, hey, do you want to vote to basically make it harder to pass constitutional amendments? And the public in Ohio were like, hell no, we don't. Let's just keep it a simple majority. So Republicans were like, fuck. And then they ended up losing the, ensuing referendum. And I think it's possible that even with a 60% threshold in Florida, that they could lose that as well, because abortion or pro-life, pro-forced birth policies in Florida are still not very popular.
True.
All right.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, I guess the unfortunate thing is that it's obviously a very anti-democratic thing to do, right? Because obviously it's unfortunately, like, just the way it works out, you can't be like, oh, well, for the threshold, to increase the threshold to 60%, you should require 60%. Well, you only need a majority of the vote to raise. Like, in theory, you could raise the threshold to 99% with only 51% of people voting in favor of it, which is kind of ridiculous. But again, I think that could play against them, obviously, because you could always basically motivate more people to come out. And if you end up in an environment where 60+% of Floridians are voting to protect abortion, do you end up in an environment where 60+% of Floridians vote for that, but also they vote for Trump? I mean, maybe, right? But
but it seems less likely, right? Exactly. So, I mean, that's why the Biden campaign, which I think they're probably overstating it, but I think they're right to try to put the fear of God in Republicans. They're saying that Florida's in play now. Yeah. I think that's probably an overstatement, but it's certainly more in play than it was.
And by the way, another reason to elect Democrats down ballot is the Attorney General of Arizona has already said she's not enforcing this law. She's like, I'm not going to prosecute anybody for, basically... understanding that the regulations are coming from, the 1860s or whenever this was passed. And this was an election. You know, she ended up winning this election, the attorney general's race in Arizona, by like 500 votes.
Yeah,
It was
she
a
had
very,
a
very close race.
250 vote margin, and that's where I almost wish Pisco was here, because it would be fun to see if he thinks that's a valid flex of separation of powers. Where, okay, the Supreme Court in Arizona, you know, it basically resurrects this draconian law, and so is it a perfectly valid use of separation of powers for the executive branch of Arizona to say, fine, but we're not going to enforce it, so it's effectively a dead letter? I think that's cool, but whatever. All right, we got to continue with the. We are 5 minutes in, and we've had 35 minutes of commentary. This is, by the way, this is, I feel like, what the Three Wonks do. Econoboi's his primary podcast, which you all should definitely check out. The Three Wonks, like and subscribe. You can also like and subscribe to Staxioms too, even though I don't like him all that much.
Fair.
Yeah.
Valid.
Happened with a lot of folks on the MAGA side, and I think that this has the potential to backfire. Now, there's going to be so many other issues. I know Jen and Brian will talk about some of them, so I'm not ready to say this is going to be the defining issue in November, but it seems to be important.
And jump in anytime, guys, if you feel passionate about it. But Brian, I want to ask you, do you think that this is going to be a deciding issue, or maybe one one deciding issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the issue. To David's point, in terms of being able to straddle both sides, I think Donald Trump tried to do that, and it blew up in his face pretty badly, because on Monday he came out and said that he supports states' rights, and you know the veracity of that claim we can get into in a moment, because he doesn't. But regardless, he said it. He said he supports states' rights. And then what happened on Tuesday? The very next day, within 24 hours, a state came out and said that we're upholding an abortion ban from 1864. And so by virtue of saying that he supports states' rights, he now owns the issue that happened within 24 hours of him saying that. So there is no way to be able to straddle this issue, because when you claim that you want states' rights in an attempt to make yourself seem more moderate, what the states are actually doing completely undermines that, and it does it immediately.
But Cenk, he did say today, he was in Atlanta and he was getting off a plane, either getting off or getting on a plane, and he said to a reporter, I'm going to speak to the governor, we're going to fix that, take care of it immediately.
So look, he's trying to have his cake and eat it too, and he's now become a standard greasy politician. Oh, I'm so proud that I overturned Roe v. Wade. And at the same time, I don't mean it. I don't mean it. Yeah, women can have any rights as they want, as long as I get elected and I get rich and I get famous and all these things. So which one is it, Donald? You greasy politician. So he's so, and the Republicans' hypocrisy is obvious, as it is every single time. Lindsey Graham all of a sudden saying this is a moral issue that has nothing to do with geography. So let me get this right. When conservatives in this country were defending states' rights during slavery and Jim Crow for 100 years, that was not a moral issue? Or that was a moral issue that was totally fine to be decided by geography. But all of a sudden, we're not talking about states' rights because he wants to make abortion illegal everywhere. Lindsey Graham does. And so Donald Trump, make up your mind. In the case of Arizona, real quick, look, the court decision is what it is. When you overturn Roe v. Wade, things like this happen. Old laws kick into place. I don't have much of an issue with that legally. Policy-wise, it's a disaster for the women of Arizona. And then in terms of politics, Joe Biden has never had a better gift. This puts Arizona back into play. Right. Now Biden has a pretty great chance of winning Arizona.
And for people like Carrie Lake, it's a disaster. For anybody who's on the ticket in Arizona as a Republican, I think it would be a disaster for them. So,
it's such a disaster, I'll point out. So I don't know if you guys saw it, but Carrie Lake actually not only went so far as to distance herself from this ruling, she hilariously actually put out an edited video, like a campaign video, in which she... why is it doing this? What am I doing here?
She basically claimed she sort of said she was pro-choice without.
Yeah, right. She's like, listen, you know, like I value life, but I support a woman's right to, and without a complete, like, total lack of irony and self-awareness. But she actually issued a scripted ad for this to try to do it.
There was a funny viral, I think it was maybe a viral Reddit post. It kind of got popular on multiple platforms, but maybe it was a Twitter post as well, where some guy was like, look, I just think politics is too polarized. You know, take pro-life and pro-choice. You know, why can't we all just agree that it's up to the individuals involved to, you know, make their decision and just leave it at that? And then somebody was like, that's called pro-choice, dumbass. Like, what do you think? What do you think that means? And that's kind of what Carrie Lake is trying to do. It's like, Carrie Lake, you are one of the craziest, like, Lauren Boebert level insane people the Republicans have running right now. No one believes you when you are trying to play the moderate. No one believes you. No one's going to take that seriously.
And she has tried so hard here lately. Did you see where she tried to extend the olive branch to Meghan McCain, the late Senator John McCain's daughter, after she and Donald Trump repeatedly insulted and denigrated McCain? And I think Meghan McCain replied with no peace, bitch, or something like that. And so she's in this thing that we talked about before, where Republicans are in a catch-22 of their own design, where in order to win the primary, they have to be as crazy and as far right as possible. But that decreases the likelihood that they win the general elections.
Right.
And they have to run twice the distance back in the opposite direction, to try to gain those independents and moderates. And I agree. I don't think Carrie Lake is going to be able to pull it off. Now, Stax, I know that you're a big Carrie Lake fan, being
Absolutely.
the men next would. So I'm curious, do you think she and her ring light stand a chance of sufficiently moderating?
I mean, you make a good point, because I think that this idea that you have to be really extreme during the primaries and then moderate back in the generals, that's a pretty well-known phenomenon for both the Republican and the Democratic Party. But the thing is that with the Republican Party has just spiraled into such extremism that is like sort of disconnected from the rest of like where the rest of America is, that in order to sort of the moment you start tapping into that extremism, you just become untenable to the rest of everyone.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I think Ruben Gallego is leading in most of the polls. I don't think that's changed. So hopefully his lead maintains. Anything else before we continue?
Let's keep going.
I would add not just Arizona either. I mean, this is going to be on the ballot in Montana. This is going to be on the ballot in Florida. This is going to be on the ballot in New York, where these congressional races have major implications for the House in 2024. So, they've really, stepped in it here as badly as they can.
Yeah. Jake, I want to pivot to something else. Some of the comments that you have made in recent days. You've been incredibly critical of President Joe Biden here. In recent days, you have even gone as far to suggest that you would vote for RFK Jr. instead of Biden. Really?
Yeah, I'm considering it. So I don't know why people get so outraged by this. And I know part of it is that it's a binary world. So when you say you're dissatisfied with Joe Biden, people go, oh, so you love Donald Trump? No, I hate Donald Trump. I don't know that anybody hates Donald Trump more than I do. Having said that, that doesn't mean that Joe Biden doesn't have an awful, immoral, genocide-supporting policy in Gaza. And I'm disgusted by it, and any decent person should be disgusted by it. So what am I supposed to say? Like, oh, Joe Biden's so great. No, I don't do propaganda. Joe Biden sucks, and his corruption is the same as all of the establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans. They take hundreds of millions, actually in the case of Biden, billions of dollars in corporate campaign contributions and pretend that the contributions don't matter to them. So I'm not ever going to grab pom-poms and cheerlead for Joe Biden. Now, in terms of RFK Jr., I'm not saying I'm going to vote for him. I'm saying I have begun to consider it. He's crazy on vaccines and conspiracy theories, et cetera. At the same time, he doesn't come in with a giant amount of corruption baggage like Biden and Trump do. So that's just reality. And then where does that leave me? I don't know. I'm going to see how the campaign plays out.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, this is so I was moving stuff into my new apartment, listening to this in the background, and this is kind of where I had to stop because this is so baffling to me. So I don't know.
It's quite baffling.
Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted about this. I think I want to say it was Jank. Jank had released that video where he decided, I'm considering basically voting for RFK Jr. Now, even Anna was like aghast. Her reaction was like, I can't believe he just said that. But then Anna comes out only like within a week later to basically say, I don't morally feel like I can vote for Biden. So on one hand, I'm aghast that you're going to vote for RFK Jr. because RFK Jr. is so crazy. But what? I'm considering voting for Cornel West or like one of these other people, like independents. And, it's obviously really disappointing because for all you could say about TYT, historically, they have been relatively pragmatic. They were very disappointed in Obama's first term. They came out and they released a video. We are endorsing Obama. It is the right strategic option. They did the exact same thing in 2016. They could not stand Hillary Clinton. They came out, they said, hey, vote for Hillary Clinton. It's the right thing to do. They did the exact same thing in 2020 when they came out and they said, vote for Biden. It's the right thing to do. And then for some reason, I really just do not understand this. It is insane to think that the choices are any different. Now, I'm a firm believer, fight as hard as you want in the primary. Be choosy in a primary if you want. If you want to vote for somebody polling at 3% in a primary, go for it, right? Because it's a primary. But when you're in the general election, realistically, you've only got a couple options. You've got Biden and you've got Trump. And even if you had a legitimate three-way race, the idea that RFK Jr. would make a better president than Joe Biden is a legitimately insane thing to think. It's just insane. There is no universe where on any issue, and I will like literally any issue, that Biden is worse than RFK Jr. on, and I will take that all the way to the bank.
So before I speak, I want to give Staxioms a chance if he wants to. If he has
I mean, these types of, sometimes I call them enlightened leftists, always kind of like sometimes I cycle between like whether or not I should be as critical as I should be to them. I think generally Josiah is my like, hey, we gotta unite, we gotta work together. But we haven't streamed in a little while, so right now I'm very angry at them. So
right. And
he
I
hasn't been my
chance,
anchor. You know,
I haven't had the chance to like for us to have those phone calls where we just like bitch at loud volumes about our frustrations and get them off our chest, and then we're able to move on and be more rational in public.
There's like there's so many dimensions where this just falls apart that it's kind of hard to pick one. But I think that there's like generally like a failure of civics here, where it's hard. It's hard to choose like a specific pathway to be frustrated with. But on the one hand, I don't know who told you that democracy means that it's the person who agrees with you the most is the person who should be elected, and that if you can't find a person who agrees with you on every issue, then that's not democracy. I don't know who told you that's the concept of how a democracy should work. On the second hand, if you want to be frustrated with the two-party system, if you want to be frustrated with first past the post and the electoral college and the ways that we elect presidents, that's fair. But we need to take the first baby steps and have the conversation that we don't live in that world right now. That we live in the world where there's two parties and RFK Jr. cannot win. He cannot win. There is a 0% chance that he will win unless maybe Joe Biden dies or like there is a revolution that happens in between now and September. Like
President Biden would need to, if for RFK Jr. to potentially win, President Biden would have to die, and then the Democrats, the Democrats would then have to nominate, or like it would.
Yeah, no,
RFK still can't win
mental gymnastics that it's enough to say that it's a 0%.
Yeah,
chance.
He would have to have one of the major party nominations in order to win. So this is my stance on it. So a couple of things. Number one, we actually just found out within like the past week that a prominent RFK Jr. campaign official, she got busted during a private like fundraiser or like a seminar speaking to supporters, where she said that the goal of RFK, knowing that he's probably not going to win, is to be a spoiler for Trump. That's the campaign's motivation, to basically try to throw the vote to the House of Representatives. And under its current constitution, that would enable Republicans in the House to make Donald Trump the president. I mean, it's on camera. It's not speculation.
Because even the most charitable reading of that clip, she basically says, well, hey, look, if you vote for us and Trump ends up winning, at least Biden doesn't end up winning, where it's like, okay, if the line isn't necessarily like our goal is to be a spoiler, but rather our ideological bend is such that we prefer Trump to Biden, again, this is not a good person to vote for over.
Right.
That's an indictment. That's an indictment. And also, so there's that point, number one. Number two, RFK, oh, damn it. We just, Econoboi said it. So that if you go by policy basis, the Biden is still the superior candidate. And this is what I was going to say. Yeah. So listen, I understand that Cenk obviously has perfectly legitimate frustrations with how the Biden administration is managing aspects of foreign policy, particularly the situation in Israel or in Gaza. And to me, that's why I understand and have not spoken out against the uncommitted vote. So like if you are basically playing like it's game theory, right? Where, listen, I want to extract concessions from President Biden, so I will vote uncommitted to try to push him in a policy direction that I prefer. That is democracy, and I think that's perfectly fair, because you're also leaving it open to the president that he can win back your vote. That's democracy. I totally understand it. What Cenk is doing is saying, no, it's not uncommitted. I'm actually at this point probably going to vote for RFK, or Anna Kasparian come out and saying that she will not vote for President Biden no matter what. When people do that, they are losing the game theory. They are actually losing the game.
Well, but really quick, it goes a step further though, because in that same video where Anna said, I don't know if I can consciously vote for Biden because of this, she also said, even if Biden did a 180
right
on the Gaza policy, I still would not vote for him. And it's like, look,
did she give a reason as to like here? What?
Because he's already crossed the red line. She said that to Kyle Kalinske.
Because like it's like how do we be pragmatists here? Because if that is your stance, why would the Biden administration ever kowtow to you? Why would they ever listen to you? Like, you're saying this is a protest, but if you're saying there are no demands that you could meet that would make that would cause me to change my mind, that would get you my vote, then why would they ever listen to you? Why would they not just go to moderate Republicans?
Precisely.
Like, it's so frustrating where I have to argue pragmatism. Like, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's the problem is that, look, I understand why like the harsh utilitarian analysis doesn't really jive with everyone. Like,
Sure.
oh, like, yeah, like Biden and Trump are both pro-genocide, but at least Biden's in favor of gay rights and protecting women's rights to choose and all these other welfare programs and things like that that are so much better. And it's like, yes, okay, on one hand, yes, that's true. Obviously, even if Trump and Biden were the exact same on Israel and Palestine, I think that all of those unique reasons for Biden are a reason in our current electoral system to vote for Biden. But the reality is they're not the same on Israel and Palestine. They have very different policies. Biden has taken, now to be fair, it's not like a radical defund every dollar to Israel stance that many progressives want, but at the same time, we have to recognize that the policy of Biden is one of the most critical policies towards Israel in literally 30 years, right? It's been a very long time since we've had such an adversarial relationship between Israel and American foreign policy. And I think that's a good thing, because I think Israel's probably they've gone way too far in many aspects of their conduct in this war.
To
and
say nothing that we
Strip,
should
but
never have a policy with any country of unconditional support. That's absurd. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
if
of
it's Israel,
course,
the
but
United Kingdom or whatever. I mean, we need to be
yeah.
backing off from that as just a default.
But that's the thing, right? Is that we don't live in a world. We don't currently live in a world where, including RFK, because RFK is more pro-Israel than Biden is, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't live in a world where there is a viable candidate who is, this radical, sort of in favor of defunding Israel, right? And so you've got a candidate who is, at the very least, Israel skeptical. Of course, he funds the Iron Dome, and there's still arms sales and things like that. But at the very least, a much more pro-humanitarian policy with regards to Palestine and Israel. And then you've got another candidate who basically just says, do whatever you can to finish the war as early as possible. That's Trump's policy. Right. And so if you really care about saving as many Palestinian lives and ensuring as quality of life as you can, well, then I just don't see how taking 30 minutes, standing in line and casting a vote for Biden is like a totally unreasonable ask in that circumstance.
Furthermore, even if because I think Cenk and Anna reside in California, right? So that's probably not going to swing for RFK or Trump, right? It's probably a safe district. So let's say, just for their own personal standard, they still can't vote for Joe Biden. I think that's still the wrong message to put out there, given their enormous platform, because they have viewers in swing states who may take that, internalize it, and say, okay, yeah, actually, there's nothing that President Biden can do to earn my vote, so I'm either going to stay home or I'm going to vote for one of his opponents. And to your point, even on that specific policy, if you're a one-issue voter, which is foreign policy, Donald Trump is just objectively worse based on his record and his aspirations, and based on what RFK Jr. has had to say about the matter. We can say the same thing there, to say nothing of the litany of issues on domestic policy, where Biden is also objectively better, in this time by leagues and leagues. Anything else before we jump back into the video?
It reminds me a little bit of this XKCD comic that I love. It's like a bunch of people discussing about how fractionalized their communities are right now. There's just like 16 groups. There's like they're all over the place, and then one person stands up and he's like, I know that we need to create a group that unifies all of them. And then the next panel is like, okay, now there are 17 groups that are highly fractionalized. And it's sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was just going to say, like, I think if you asked Anna and Cenk, would you do everything you could to protect LGBTQ rights? They would say yes. It's like, well, why aren't you voting for Biden then?
Yeah.
Would you do everything you could to restore abortion rights in this country? Yes. Well, why aren't you voting for Biden then?
Right.
Would you do everything you could to ensure a more equitable economy? Well, then why aren't you voting for Biden then, right? And of course they would say, well, it's because of this other issue, the Gaza Strip issue. And again, don't tell me you're doing everything you can to support these other people when you're telling me you're choosing to sit out this election or to vote for an unviable third party. I mean, that's just crazy. Obviously, Anna's really seemed to have committed to not voting for Biden. Cenk's just saying, stupidly, I'm considering voting for RFK. We'll see what happens come election day. But, if Trump ends up winning, I think anybody like that really shares does share the blame.
Absolutely. Again, even if they personally choose not to vote, just throwing that into the ether, given the platform they have, I would argue is incredibly irresponsible. I've got more to say on some of Anna's takes recently, but we'll play some more of the video first.
Yeah.
You have said that Joe Biden has been, quote, corrupt his whole life. I mean, what evidence do you have that Joe Biden is corrupt?
100% corrupt. I have overwhelming evidence. But I don't want people to think that I'm picking on Joe Biden as he's the only politician who's corrupt or that he's personally corrupt. I'm talking about systemic corruption. The problem with Donald Trump is he's personally corrupt and he can't wait to take money from Saudi Arabia and all these other places. We get that. We all understand that, right? But when it comes to Biden, people in mainstream media and the Democratic Party make what I view to be a totally insane statement, which is, no, he might have taken $1 billion from corporate contributions, but he doesn't owe them any favors. And he doesn't let those donors affect him at all. Look, that's just nuts. So here, I'll give you an example of the thing that I'm most animated about these days, which is Gaza. He's taken $11.2 million from AIPAC. I mean, I'm curious what you guys think, but I think it's mental to think that he doesn't.
Before I move on, I understand that. Listen, I get it that you're upset about Gaza. That is understandable. A lot of people are upset, and a lot of people have questions about policy as it relates to Israel and what's going on with Gaza. But to say that Joe Biden is corrupt, maybe he's taking advantage of a system that's already in play. But again, I'll ask you, what evidence do you have that Joe Biden is corrupt?
No, look, this is the thing that I'm confused by you guys on. And so Joe Biden here, let's talk about one issue, but it applies to drug companies, oil companies, banks, every kind of corporate contribution. But in the case of Gaza, that's a good example. AIPAC has given him $11.2 million over the course of his career. He's the #1 recipient of AIPAC money in United States Senate history. So my proposition, which I would, if you did a poll on it, my guess is 95% of Americans would agree, is that does that $11 million affect Joe Biden's unilateral, unconditional support of Israel throughout his entire career and today? 95% of Americans would agree with me. Of course it affects his decisions. But yet all of mainstream media treats it as like corruption. How dare you? He's an angel who would never be affected by $11 million.
Well, that's not what I'm saying, Jake. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying that.
Could I jump in for a second?
Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you. You're a straight talker. You know RFK is not going to win. He doesn't have a chance to win. But you also know that every vote that's not going to Cenk, you know that RFK is not going to be the next president. I think we can all speak plainly here. I mean, you're trafficking in straight denial if you're actually claiming by shaking your head.
Wait, is he shaking his? That's where I was confused. Like, is he just shaking his head because he disagrees with the proposition?
It seems like he's saying that he genuinely has a chance, which is just like I don't know what failure.
It. Oh, okay, all right.
That you think that RFK Jr. has a chance.
Well, I think just to if we're going to ask questions, I would say what are the 5 states he's most likely to have a shot in? Maybe we could start narrow.
Yeah, guys, look, here's the deal. Do I know the third-party candidates have a very, very low chance? Jill Stein, Cornel West, and every other election. Of course,
they have no chance.
I'm not a person who denies reality in any way, shape, or form. Having said that, this election is kind of like the Ross Perot election, where a third-party candidate actually has a legitimate chance.
No, wait a minute. Ross Perot didn't have a chance. What are you talking about? Ross Perot was still like leagues away from winning that election. I love how he says, listen, I understand that. I'm not going to deny reality. I mean, third-party candidates, no. But this time, RFK has just as much of a chance to lose, just like the last gold standard for the third-party candidate, Ross Perot.
It's like I hate to be that like obnoxious, like I'm really trying not to be like on my pedestal wagging my finger, but like also this is like basic civics about first past the post. Like you can't even win a plurality. You have to win a majority of Americans. And like, I don't know.
Well, you have to win a majority if you're a Democrat, but not if you're a Republican, just to be clear.
True.
No.
Yeah, they've rigged the system for minoritarian rule, but I digress. I'm sorry, you were saying Econoboi?
I mean, it's unfortunate. Look, if we lived in the Netherlands where they have a proportional representation system, and you said, hey, the Labour Party is just not quite as progressive as me, I'm going to vote for the leftist party or whatever it is, it'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever. We have a proportional representation system. That's just how it is. You can be principled in such a system because it's literally one vote equals one proportional chance of your guy winning an extra seat or something. It's much more reasonable. And, the leftist parties can form coalitions and things like that. But that's just not the system that we live in, right? You have to vote for the most viable candidate. And yeah, I talked about it on my Twitter, which was basically that, if we just believe in harm reduction in general, it just makes no sense to support anybody but Joe Biden if you're a progressive. I mean, look, that's what Bernie Sanders is endorsing, right? Bernie Sanders, Democratic Socialist, the pretty much the first most prominent Democratic Socialist in contemporary American politics.
Class traitor.
Yeah, well, of course, but he says, vote for Joe Biden. That's the righteous thing to do. And pretty much every progressive in Congress says the same thing. I think there's only a few.
AOC,
Yeah,
so you have the two primary pillars, both one in the House and one in the Senate of the Progressive Caucus.
I also,
about the same time, came out and endorsed President Biden. And I'll say this, to both their credits, though I'm sure they have enormous disagreements on policy, particularly foreign policy, with the president, they haven't wavered. I mean, Bernie Sanders, recently did some like joint press conferences with the president about prescription drug prices and being able to reduce those for Medicare, or at least allow Medicare to negotiate them. AOC has been doing interviews lately. I just did a video about an interview or an exchange she had with Mehdi Hassan. And again, she's not wavered of her support for President Biden, even though she also says that she has legitimate disagreements with him.
Well, I heard somebody say that the reason that their hypothesis for why AOC has become 10% more establishment leaning, let's say, since she became a congresswoman back in, I think it was 2016 or 2018 or something like that. 2018 is because, she's actually working on a day-to-day basis with these Republican colleagues and Republican politicians. And, understanding that when Trump gets elected a second time, of course, it's not Trump that's really running things. It's all these people surrounding him that are really the movers and shakers. And the people that Trump is surrounding himself with, I mean, look, he was saying, I think I talked about it on the last podcast. He was saying that he wanted to make Stephen Miller the attorney general. That is like making Nick Fuentes the attorney general. Stephen Miller is a Nazi. Okay. And that's not an exaggeration. I mean, for any Democratic socialist, I'm sure they're comfortable calling Stephen Miller a Nazi. That is who Trump wants to make the attorney general. He's talked about deputizing localized police forces to directly deport Mexicans out of this country, right? An unbelievable overreach of power. Imagine every single Republican-run county, the sheriff's department is unilaterally able to deport somebody for having a Hispanic last name. That is the policy that is endorsed by the attorney general candidate under Donald Trump. And that's just a world of difference between Trump and Biden, like alone, that should make somebody say to themselves, yes, of course, it's strategically the correct decision to support Biden. You can critically support Biden as much as you want, but again, spending the 10 minutes in the voting booth, clicking Biden, going about your day, I mean, it's a very small price to pay for protecting so many minorities in our country, and having a much more humanitarian foreign policy as well.
Yeah, to say nothing, I mean, so some other things too, because a lot of people will defer to institutions. They'll say, listen, the institutions stopped Trump in his first term, and if he's, God forbid, given a second term, they'll stop him again. But the thing that I keep emphasizing to people is that these institutions have to be manned and staffed by people.
Correct.
And Donald Trump has made it abundantly clear that he intends to fill these institutions with people who are loyal to him.
And he already has, how many judges did he appoint? And Supreme Court justices as well, 3. But the on just the Ninth Circuit, it's so many. But I also want to say this, because I do think that it's fair to criticize the system. If you're frustrated that you have to choose between two people, I think that that's fair. And I think if you want to fight for abolishing the Electoral College, for implementing a ranked choice voting or approval voting or something like that, I am all with you there. But we also have to reconcile the fact that that is not the current system we are operating in, and pretending like that's not the case and just behaving in a way that would behaving like we are in that other system is just not productive.
You have to walk through a rational process of goal attainment. So yes, I also want to abolish the Electoral College, which is an antiquated system. It's never worked the way that the founders intended, or at least said on paper that they wanted it to work. It's also something that, when we have inspired other democratic republics on planet Earth to model themselves after the United States, they either don't take up the Electoral College, or if they do, they abolish it in short order because they realize it's a completely stupid system.
Or they don't even have a presidential system and they just have a prime minister and a parliament.
Very true. But yes, even like the presidential democratic republics that we have inspired over the years, even the few that have initially adopted an Electoral College, they quickly abolished it in short order because they realized that it makes more sense to do direct suffrage for your nation's highest office. But to your point, Stax, you still have to act, again, in a rational process of goal attainment, which is, if you have an end destination, let's just use a metaphor here. If you have a particular end destination, and that's Electoral College abolition city, you need to get on the transportation which will take you the closest in that direction, and not one that takes you in the opposite direction or even just keeps you exactly where you are. So even if it won't take you to exactly where you want to go, then you just need to keep bus hopping until you finally get there. That's the only thing you can do. Anything else is, I would argue, irrational and privileged and dangerous. Anything else before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, people like this are a great minority of people. It's just that, unfortunately, it only takes several thousand votes in certain swing states to really make the difference. I mean, I remember in 2016 when Hillary Clinton lost, and the Jill Stein's campaign helped pay for a recanvass of Midwestern states, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that Jill Stein might have realized she really fucked up, and the Green Party really fucked up by siphoning so many votes away. I mean, that was a record election year for the Green Party. They ended up getting 1% of the vote, and of course that was all the difference in the world in all of those swing states. And it's it's to a large degree, I think people learned their lessons, but I think we can see that in 2020. But
yeah, who the fuck would have?
Interesting.
Who would have voted? Who would have voted for Jill Stein?
It is interesting,
moron.
To talk about Jill Stein and Jill Stein supporters who've learned their lessons.
Yeah.
You never know Econoboi when they could be anywhere, right? Jill Stein supporters, they can be standing right next.
I
to
regret
you.
my choices. I regret my choices.
Oh,
Saxiom, you voted for Jill Stein and
I did.
You voted for Jill Stein
when I was like 19. When I was an idiot. Yes.
I didn't know that.
Oh
my gosh.
Wait, hold on. I've repented. I have admitted my sins, and I've moved forward.
Look, when I was 19, the first presidential ballot I voted was in the Democratic primary for Bernard Sanders, Staxioms. Okay?
I voted but I was also Oh wait, in the primary or general? Is that what you said?
The primary, of course, and then the general. I voted for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, well, that's very based of you.
Yeah, I'm glad I had no idea, Stax. Well, wow, I didn't realize this applied to you the whole time.
It's
Unbelievable. Are despised. So if a Mark Cuban or a Jon Stewart were to come in, I think they win the whole damn thing. RFK Jr. is a pretty weak candidate, so he has a much lower chance. But even so, he's polling at 10, sometimes at 20%. So if you think that has no chance, I think you're wrong. Is it a high chance? No, of course not.
Wait.
I have a couple.
Go
ahead, Brian. Sorry.
The broader question.
Wait, did somebody say something?
Did he say RFK is polling at 20%?
I'm sure somewhere. Maybe an RFK is like.
There's
maybe if they poll an RFK rally, he's polling at 20%. You know what I'm saying? Maybe they polled the number of people who wear RFK Jr. shirts, and 20% of them say, "Yeah, I think RFK would be the guy to vote for." But yeah, I'm not sure what poll he's talking about.
That just seems insanely high. Like, it could be right. I'm not saying it's wrong, but that just seems.
The question I want to ask is knowing that this is very likely not going to happen. You have more likelihood of being able to persuade, to push Joe Biden, especially on these issues that you're passionate about, than you would if Donald Trump became president, which would be the likely outcome by throwing support behind someone like RFK. You think Joe Biden is bad on Gaza? What do you think Donald Trump would do to Palestine, to Gaza, if he became the next president?
Hang on, Jake, before you answer.
And we're all saying this as if from the luxury of a bunch of guys sitting here while abortion bans are being passed across the country. Right. We just talked about an 1864 abortion ban that was just upheld in Arizona. If Donald Trump becomes the next president, then forget Arizona. We're going to have nationwide abortion ban in California, New York, Vermont. I mean, we have the luxury of not having to worry about that in this conversation right here, but there are women across the country who will lose that luxury by virtue of, having...
Wait, is he shaking his head on that too? That there wouldn't be a national abortion ban if Republicans had their way?
Well, they're in favor of states' rights. So I think that they would actually not have a national abortion ban because they said that they were in favor of states' rights, which means
that's where I'm with you. The sarcasm, but where I'm confused is I don't know if there's a delay on Cenk's end or whatever when he's shaking his head. Maybe he addresses it.
Imposing purity tests on certain candidates.
That is true. That is true. But hang on, Jake. I want David to jump in because I want to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, listen, on the RFK math, first of all, I mean, I've been seeing what some of his advisors have been saying. One of them's talking about how his path to victory goes through California. I've looked at the math in California. He'd have to take half of Biden's and 1/3 of Trump's support. I mean, I think that it is a mathematical impossibility. Cenk and I have talked about the math of this before on my show, and we may just disagree about what's likely versus what's probable. On the corruption thing, I actually agree with Cenk that every single person who has been president has both benefited from and accepted the status quo of campaign finance, the way politics is financed, super PACs, all of it. And also because we have a Republican Party that has spent years now wasting millions in taxpayer money looking for supposed criminal bribery that they still have no evidence of. James Comer is privately admitting in fundraising emails, we're not going to impeach the guy, it's just not going to work. I think it's important to be responsible and talk about how Cenk pointing out the corruption of the system is totally different than Joe Biden being guilty of any things they're personally accusing him of. And then lastly, and then I'll go back to this other stuff, I don't want to vote in a way that is I'm a super simple and pragmatic guy. My vote in New York or Cenk and Brian's votes in California aren't actually going to, quote, matter in the sense that neither of those states will be close. Biden's going to win all of them. I actually think of the three options, Biden's the best option, so that's who I'm voting for, rather than calculating message sending or whatever. And on Gaza, if one is concerned about the prioritization of the Palestinian people, RFK would be worse based on everything I've heard him say about the conflict, and Trump would be even worse. So even on that, the best option's Biden.
And Cenk, David is right. When I said that he may be taking advantage of a system that's already in place, he articulated that much better than I did. I don't.
So did you all catch that Cenk nodded with Pacman there? Like when Pacman at the very end said that RFK Jr. on this particular topic, which is the most important to you, foreign policy with respect to Gaza and Israel, that he would be objectively worse. Cenk nodded. That's where I'm very confused. Is there some sort of delay, or does he?
Well, it feels.
I mean,
sorry. It feels. Speaking as someone who a former Jill Stein voter, I will say that
former.
Yeah. I'm gonna.
I mean, she's running again, buddy. She's running again. So you have your chance to make that woman president.
I think that there is a predilection in a lot of people, including myself, to be very anarchic in like a little anti-system, a little like, hey, things can be better, and I think that in a lot of ways that's a very valid feeling, like things can be better. I think that sometimes people's responses to that feeling is therefore things need to change without doing the calculus of whether or not that would be better or worse, if that makes sense. And maybe that seems a little, I don't want to I'm not a psychologist, I don't want to psychoanalyze it, but I don't know. I see that tendency in a lot of people sometimes.
Yeah, I've heard people on Twitter, they make this point of like the idea of like, what if it was Hitler versus 99% Hitler? Like, would you vote for 99% Hitler? And the reason that, like, for instance, like somebody like Sean on Twitter will say, the best thing to do when it's Hitler versus 99% Hitler, and those are your only two options, is to overthrow the system. It's like, okay, well, I would certainly agree with that. Right, like if it were the case that we would literally choose between an actual fascist and basically a fascist who's very marginally less fascist, then of course I would say join an armed resistance group, flee the country, like whatever you have to do basically to save the country, get yourself and your family out of that situation. At the same time, though, if we're talking about an open democratic election, of course it's the case that, again, spending 20 minutes in a ballot box and checking 99% Hitler to save that 1% of people or whatever seems like a valuable use of time with regards to harm reduction, at the same time that you can organize your armed resistance or whatever against the system. Now, luckily, we're not really faced with such a stark choice. It's sort of like 99% Hitler versus, Joe Biden. And I would say that,
he's just 99. He's just 99. He's not 99%.
Exactly. I mean,
anything. He's just 99.
In my crazy, resist lib opinion, I suppose, I just don't think that Biden, I think there's a lot of daylight between Biden and Trump on really important issues.
A horizon, one might say, like a full vista.
I also do like genuinely get confused with people's memory sometimes. And I think that human beings are really good at adapting. Not to continue the psychoanalysis, but I will continue it.
I was going to say, I don't want to psychoanalyze it. Then you like.
But here's what I'm going to do. But I think human beings are really good at adapting. And I think that we have a really that benefited us for so long for such a good reason that sometimes we get in the current environment and it's sometimes hard to do a little bit of a recollection of even something that was like 4 or 5 years ago. And I don't know. Do you remember when Trump fucking tweeted Muslims can't go into this country? And then everyone freaked out because no one even knew, like he didn't even sign a law. He just tweeted it. And everyone's like, is this something that's allowed? Is this something that's okay? And all the airports had to figure that shit out and we're scrambling everywhere. Yeah. And
Very
I could run through 20 million things about the crazy shit that Trump did that sometimes we like genuinely forget how psychotic that
sometimes
was.
All the time. I would argue, listen, I think
Like,
there are very few anti-GOP people on the internet than myself. And I have a hard time keeping track of all this shit. And he is advantaged by it politically. We remember every little goddamn thing that Joe Biden ever screwed up on. But Donald Trump, I mean, it's just how we process things. Like it's a blur. It's like, what's that phrase? Like, one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. It's kind of like that when it comes to Donald Trump's moral and political foibles. We just instinctively, this is something that I have to fight in myself because it's just wrong and dangerous and irrational. And we grade Trump on a curve. And it's 7 of Trump's mistakes count as, 1 of Biden's mistakes count for 7 to 10 of Trump's mistakes.
Right. And it's also not just the breadth of how much damage he's done, but it's also he's been in the political zeitgeist and been at the forefront of the Republican Party for 12 years now?
Yeah.
No, less than that.
8
years, 10, something like that. 8 to 10 years.
No, it is. No. It's almost 9, or it's almost 10, because he announced his candidacy officially in 2015, right? So
so 9 years ago. Yeah. There's just at some point you get numb to him, and I don't even know how to counteract that problem other than shouting, because we can only consistently shout how insane this human being is for so long, and how unusual and illiberal and anti-democratic. And
I want to throw one big example in before Econoboi talks, which is one that I've had to remind myself, and I've been repeatedly saying for the last week on my show, just with repetition to try to get people to remember. Yeah. So obviously one of the primary charges against the Democratic Party and President Biden now from the right is this idea that the president has weaponized the Justice Department against Donald Trump. Right now, we're in day 2 of the Manhattan trial. They're in jury selection, and that's still the charge, even though that's a Manhattan district attorney who's making that decision. He doesn't report to the president. He's not a federal officer. But set all that aside, what's hilarious is, I don't know if you all remember this. I forgot about it. But in 2020, when Donald Trump was the sitting president of the United States, he repeatedly, we have in clips on Twitter, he called into Maria Bartiromo's show on Fox News and publicly demanded that Attorney General Bill Barr prosecute and indict then candidate Joe Biden. We have Trump dead to rights repeatedly on air on the biggest mainstream news network in the country, doing the very thing that the right claims but has no proof of Joe Biden doing to Trump. That should be the only thing. Anytime anybody ever says, the next time I have a conversation with Rob Noor about the weaponization of the Justice Department, we're not going to go anywhere, because I'm going to be like, hey, here's this clip of Trump doing the very thing that you say Biden is doing, but you have no proof that Biden is doing. What do you say to this? Unless you concede that it was wrong for Trump to publicly do that, which most Trump supporters never would. That's different. It's okay for Trump to publicly call for the prosecution of his political opponents. We're not going to go anywhere. We're just going to go in a loop. Everything you say is going to come back to that Fox News clip, which is how we all should be addressing this claim. But we don't, because I don't know about you. I forgot about it. I forgot that Trump did that.
There's so much stuff. I don't remember that at all.
Econoboi, did you remember it?
Do you I could go through so many fucking examples. Do you remember when he shut down the post office?
Well, hang on, wait a minute. But I wanted on this specific one. Econoboi, did you remember this?
I remember him. He did that as a candidate. He literally said "lock her up" as one of his slogans.
True.
He talked about wanting to imprison Hillary Clinton, literally throughout his whole presidential run in 2015 and 2016. I mean, I think that a lot of people are under the presumption that things can't get much worse than they are now, and it blows my mind that people have this presumption. Things can get a lot worse. I mean, for instance, and I take this seriously because, again, who you endorse, who you say, this person should run the government, says something about you. Donald Trump endorsed Mark Robinson to be the governor of North Carolina.
Yeah, that might be my governor. That guy might end up being my governor. He's the current lieutenant governor, by the way.
Mark Robinson, who at the time when he was in his mid-40s, this wasn't a teenager, this wasn't somebody who was fresh out of middle school. When he was in his mid-40s, he denied the Holocaust on
Fucking
Facebook
crazy.
and talked about Jewish-controlled media and talked about how, oh, the Jewish class is controlling our media, this and that. I mean, like some exact quotes. Here's some exact quotes. There is a reason the liberal media fills the airwaves with programs about the Nazi and the, quote, 6 million Jews they murdered. He talked about how, quote, this foolishness about Hitler disarming millions of Jews and then marching them off to a concentration camp is a bunch of hogwash. That is an exact quote from the current gubernatorial candidate representing the Republicans in North Carolina. Donald Trump endorsed this man. Okay. He said, this is the best guy. He endorsed him in the primary. He said, this is the best guy in the primary to be the Republican representative in North Carolina. Donald Trump is an abhorrent person. Mark Robinson is arguably more abhorrent. Never heard Trump deny the Holocaust, right? But at the very least, Trump appears to not care about somebody who's denying the Holocaust, as long as they're loyal to him. And this is a very dangerous environment for politics, right? I mean, if the ultimate thing is, I don't really care what you think, all I care about is if you're loyal to me. You know, what are we allowing to run our government? You know, that's pretty crazy.
100%. That's why I'm terrified that Trump's going to reintroduce that Schedule F executive order, which would effectively make all executive branch employees at-will employees, you know, who can be fired at the pleasure of the president. That would be incredibly dangerous. I digress. We'll continue.
What people think when you say Joe Biden is corrupt, that he's personally corrupt, right? Not that he's part of a system, that you're pointing out the flaws in that system. But listen, I spoke with D.L. Hughley. He said something very similar to what David said, and we'll play the soundbite for you.
I had a dinner with him and told him and the vice president the same thing. And I said, but the problem is I don't live in Gaza. I live in the United States of America. And I'm not going to, as a protest vote, make my children's life harder. I'm not going to give my vote to somebody in the protest, from a protest perspective, that would empower people that only want to make my children's life. I can't think of one group of people who wants to give you guns and abortion to rid you of any diversity, equity, inclusion. It's just a lot of things. Like at one point in America, it was illegal for slaves to learn. Now in many places, it's illegal to learn about slaves. That's a mindset. And so there are a lot of things that bother me, but I think where I see people, where I have a clear kind of line of sight is where I think what'll be best for the future of my grandchildren.
What do you say to that?
So I have so many things to say here. First, let's start out with, we are not deciding who we're voting on today. If you guys have already decided and you say, okay, Joe Biden, we bow to you, we serve you, we will do whatever you want. I'm not in that camp. Okay, so he's got to earn my vote,
Neither am I.
support, and he has not done that at all. Okay, so that's point one. But yes, on election day, if RFK Jr. is still around 10 points, that means he has 0% chance of winning. It applies to Cornell, West Stein, etc. Then I'm going to make a decision between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and I'm never going to vote for Donald Trump. So there you go. Okay, but at this point, we're not anywhere near there yet, and we've got a third-party candidate that's in double digits. In terms of Joe Biden being able to be pushed, I haven't seen it. So on Israel and Gaza, he can't be pushed at all. No matter what we do, no matter how many, like there's literally 1 million Palestinians starving to death. There's 33,000 dead already, and Joe Biden is saying no, send them $14 billion more to do more genocide. That's not a little issue. That's a giant moral issue, and I do not want to fund a genocide. So you're not going to move me off that position. But David is right. That unfortunately all three candidates are awful on Gaza. They're all despicable.
I had the UN ambassador in the other day, and I questioned her about this genocide language, and she said that she does not believe it's genocide.
That's a lunatic position. I'm sorry, but look, if you know what the definition of genocide is, it is not the same as a Holocaust. So by the way, Israel, what are you doing? For God's sake, what are you doing? Now you're bragging that it's not a Holocaust. So Holocaust is when you try to kill everybody in the race. Israel's not doing that, okay? Genocide is when you target based on a race and you kill at the levels that Israel's killing at now. Srebrenica was 6,000 Muslims that were killed by the Serbs, and the UN declared that a genocide. If Srebrenica is a genocide, there is absolutely no question at all that Gaza is a genocide, and it has all of the...
Is that not the goal of Hamas, is to wipe out the Jewish state? Is that not the goal of Hamas, to wipe out Israel?
Yeah. All of these are super tired talking points. So yes, but Israel is actually preventing a Palestinian state. For 75 long, brutal years of occupation, Israel has said, oh, theoretically the Palestinians don't want us to have a state, but you don't get a state. How's that fair? That doesn't make any sense at all. The minute they allow Palestine, look, both sides need to recognize the two states. The idea that Hamas has that Israel's not going to exist is also very much a lunatic idea and a dangerous, terrible idea. I do not support that at all. I support protecting civilian lives on both sides. And right now, Israel, we've got to be honest about this. Israel has killed 30 times the number of civilians that Hamas did. So if you think Hamas is an awful organization, as I do, then you should be outraged by what Israel has done. Yet I don't see that. When it comes to Israel, no, okay, send them 14 billion more. No, honestly, at this point, the Israeli state is, I mean, I don't want to put it on the whole government. There's a lot of great people in Israel, and I hope they turn around and they vote the right way. But this current government and the IDF, as it is currently composed, the leadership, are definitely meet the definition of terrorists. Netanyahu is one of the largest terrorists in the world right now.
Hey, real quick, and I know, Brian, you want to get in. On the issue of moving Biden, I kind of do see evidence that Biden can be moved and influenced. I mean, Biden's taken money from Big Pharma for a long time, and yet he did $35 insulin, inhalers, and on the 10 biggest Medicare drugs, now those companies are being forced to negotiate. On cannabis, quite frankly, I don't think Biden cares at all about decriminalizing or legalizing, and yet he's asked for the rescheduling of cannabis. And on student loan debt, I don't think he cared about student loan debt at all, and yet he's done more student loan debt forgiveness than any other president. So I do think that he actually listens to people around him.
Yeah. I also want to point out before, because Cenk was shaking his head there, man, I'm interested to hear what he has to say about this shit. But I will also point out that former Chief of Staff Ron Klain, who, by the way, I think that people should educate themselves on what the White House Chief of Staff does. There's a great book called The Gatekeepers. It's an amazing book. That is the most important role, more important than a Secretary of State or a Secretary of Defense. Who you have as your White House Chief of Staff if you're the president. And Ron Klain is probably the best in modern history. And he has repeatedly said, both while he was in office and then since he left office, that it was actually the progressives who in many ways on many key pieces of legislation were Biden's biggest supporters, biggest champions. And it was actually Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, the centrists, who were the pains in the ass. So Klain has actually said that, listen, if I had to tally the number of phone calls that Biden got from supportive progressives versus supportive centrists, it was actually the progressives who had his back more and were more engaged and more pushing, but also supported his agenda more in the end, whereas it was the centrists who were more likely to throw a wrench in the works. So Biden himself is not a progressive. I think he's personally a pretty moderate guy, but he has governed relatively progressively. And I think the examples that David cited were pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, I mean, just compare Biden from the start of his political career to today. I mean, obviously, he's radically different in terms of his stances on various things between now and certainly many, many years ago. And so obviously he can be pushed. I think that what Cenk would say is just that, well, he's just pushed because that's where the big money interests sort of changed over time. And so now this and that happens. And so he gets pushed in this direction. I think that's a bit of nonsense. I think Cenk has a point when he says that the sort of systemic corruption exists in the sense that, well, if you're the type of candidate who's very harshly against Big Pharma, very harshly against Israel, you don't have access to these potential giant pots of money to run a campaign. Well, of course that's true. But at the end of the day, I mean, this is what happened to Obama in 2012, right? Obama had a lot of financial industry and banker support in 2008. He basically lost all of it because despite those donations, he passed things like the Dodd-Frank Act and, really instituted a lot of policies that we don't have to get into to regulate Wall Street and regulate the big banks. And so, he ends up losing all that money, but guess what? He ends up still winning in 2012, his re-election campaign. So money's not quite everything. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. But I think Cenk, he just goes a little bit too far with the analysis of like, oh, he got $1 from this entity, and that can explain like literally every single action that this person takes in office. It's a little bit too simplistic.
Yeah, it's very reductive. And listen, I also agree that the system certainly incentivizes corruption, especially with Citizens United. That's probably the biggest piece of landmark legislation with respect to campaign finance that has made it even more corrupt. I think that he has a perfect case to be made there. But when you say Joe Biden is corrupt, like that's a very loaded phrase, right? I mean, like then by definition, literally anybody, which would include Ro Khanna, a progressive Democratic congressman, AOC, everyone, who takes any big money donors or any donations from certain interest groups, that they are by definition corrupt. And I think that's doing a lot of work there. So
Right. Because if you want to if you just want to say like all politicians are corrupt, that's one argument. But like you have to understand how language works and what an implication is. Like,
Right.
Yeah, and also to be fair, even if you take the view that our politicians are ultimately just a reflection of their donors, well, I just prefer Democratic donors then, right? I mean, even if that is
yeah,
true, what
true.
you're saying, like I'd rather Biden listen to whoever he's taking money from, because again, and clearly, if Biden is just a puppet for his donors, well, I prefer that puppet to Trump, right? 'Cause
Sign me up
again,
for big Medicaid. Like,
yeah, I mean, obviously, like there's just again, we can compare the first two. Like, what did Trump legislatively do in his first 2 years? Well, he cut taxes for the wealthy. He tried to get rid of Obamacare. Those were like
Mhm.
the two things. Compare what Biden did. Biden passed trillions of dollars of infrastructure investment, clean energy investment, relief for American families that was very horizontally distributed. He did all these things, not to mention many, many executive policies that I'm sure we would generally speaking agree with. He passed even during I believe it was in the divided Congress that he passed gay marriage, gay rights legislation as well. I mean,
no, he still technically had a majority in both chambers, but it was just in the aftermath of the.
yeah. Either
the
way, I mean,
Dobbs
compare the
decision,
first
yeah.
2 years of either one, right? I mean, even if Jenk's analysis, which is like, hey, ultimately these guys, it's because Big Gay has donated a lot of money to Biden. That's why he passed this bill. Well, I'd rather vote for a candidate that's supported by Big Gay. I mean, that's pretty reasonable if you ask me.
No, yeah, I mean, like, listen, there's actually a really good breakdown on Washington Monthly. They polled they hired out a bunch of journalists, and they actually broke it down on like 16 or 17 different policy points. They have a policy index, and you got the cliff notes, and then you've got a full-on editorial describing the issue, comparing Trump and Biden legislatively. And they take no value propositions of the legislation. So, like, for example, they don't say that a tax cut or the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that Trump passed, which is basically the only real meaningful piece of legislation he passed in terms of its widespread effects, that they don't take a value proposition, even though we would agree that that's probably a shitty bill, right? Especially when the vast majority of benefits went to those who need it the least. But would they just compare the substance of the legislation? And Biden is just a vastly better, a vastly more accomplished executive and legislator than Donald Trump. Now, if you want to take the position that the legislation Biden passed sucked, which is what a libertarian might say, for example, then I could understand you justifying your vote for Trump in that respect. But there's no contest that in terms of getting shit done, Biden is just objectively much better.
Yeah, and to your point about the centrists being the pain in the ass, let's just be clear. Biden didn't propose basically the what do you call it? What was it? The Build Back Better. The original Build Back Better proposal was $4 trillion of social spending that went directly into the hands of mothers, lower income people, students, people like that.
Yeah,
that was the proposal. If Biden could just have his way, that is what he proposed. He proposed the greatest expansion of social assistance, basically since, you'd have to say since either the war on poverty or since the Great Depression with the expansion of Social Security. That is what he proposed, right? And so if we're really going to make the case that, Biden is just the same as Trump, again, Biden wanted an extraordinary amount, an extraordinary level of expansion of Social Security and Medicare and things like this, that would have helped and made the difference in the lives of so many millions of Americans. And it was the centrist Democrats. If you want to point fingers, you can point them at Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin.
Sure.
Totally fair enough. But I mean, if we're talking about an election where Biden is on the ballot versus Trump, again, the argument that these guys are comparable in reasonable progressive, in a progressive lens, they're basically the same. I mean, that's just totally ridiculous.
Or the expiration of the enhanced child tax credit, right? That was 50 Republicans and Joe Manchin, right? Which, by the way, that I'm obviously just a terrible decision on Manchin's part. Obviously he carries blame, but even that infuriates me because I hear people who criticize Joe Biden from the left say that Joe Biden let it expire. And it's like, listen, I'm not going to put one rogue Democrat and 50 Republicans and create a false equivalence. It was Republicans who let the enhanced child tax credit expire and Joe Manchin. And the 50 Republicans are worse because one of them, a moderate Republican, could have made the brave decision to back a motion which effectively cut child poverty in half, but they didn't want to give Biden a political victory. So they closed ranks and effectively doubled child poverty the next year when the child tax credit expired. And then the Fox Propaganda Network and others blame Biden for it because it happened on Biden's watch, which was exactly what the Republicans wanted. But again, meaningful differences there. It's so infuriating. And if we can replace Manchin, I mean, we won't in West Virginia, let's be clear, but I mean, basically make up the margins by flipping Texas, for example, then if we get Colin Allred in Texas or enough Democrats who are willing to break the filibuster and just do a simple majority vote, then we'd get that child tax credit back.
Yeah. I mean, it really does feel like a lot of people genuinely just want a dictator who agrees with them. You know, like, I think a lot of people are like, well, why didn't Joe Biden do it, instead of maybe criticizing all of the oil workers in West Virginia who elected Joe Manchin? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are simply, I mean, again, that's the frustrating thing, because this is a close election. Most Americans are simply uninformed on almost all these issues. Right. I mean, most Americans who are going to go out and vote, they're going to vote based on, this guy's taller, this guy looks better. I heard Joe Biden say a thing once that I liked, so I voted for him. Joe Biden seems like a nice guy, so I'm going to vote for him. Oh, Trump he's owning the left, so I'm going to vote for him. But again, this is a close election, right? And so I think it's easy for a lot of people to say that's just Twitter, that's just random crazies on the internet. It's like, look, well, if the 15% of us that are actually really engaged, watch the news on a daily basis, read the news on a daily basis, if the 15% of us that really do that, if we cannot agree that Biden is very obviously, clearly the best person for the job in the choices that we have available to us, that is a problem, because it is a close election, and you need every single vote that you can get.
100%.
And it's also that a lot of those kind of uninformed Americans kind of gravitate towards other people's opinions who they sort of trust, if that makes sense. And for a long time, that was like, NBC or something like that. But in this sort of like new era of media, it's become people like Cenk Uygur. So it's becoming so frustrating, because it's his opinion that's sort of gravitating towards a lot of other people's opinions who are a lot less informed, if that makes sense.
Of course, yeah.
I'll say this here, and I don't know if this is a troll comment or whatever. I'm half paying attention to chat, but there's like, even if Trump wants to end democracy, I'm still not voting for Trump or for Biden. Cope and seed. I don't know if that's a troll or whatever, but listen, I can't make you vote for Biden. And now that I know that you want me to cope and seed about the fact that you're not going to vote for Biden, I'm going to do the exact opposite and just wish you well, my friend. So you are free to elaborate, though, by the way. I'm always interested in somebody's reasons for why they vote the way they do.
Steve, when Biden gets reelected, I am going to ensure that he specifically comes to your house and makes you get vaccinated, okay?
Oh, is Steve conservative? That might explain it. Well, yeah, if you're a conservative, I don't expect you to do the smart
I'm just
thing.
kidding.
Jesus.
I mean, he certainly seems autistic.
Or am I?
And when you look at the state of the economy, you mentioned the CHIPS Act and all of that. That does not, Cenk, that has no bearing on anything?
Those are two different things. And so it's really important to clarify, Don, as you pointed out accurately earlier. So, for example, you're right. I don't want anybody thinking that I think that Joe Biden is personally corrupt like Donald Trump is. I think all the Hunter Biden hearings are nonsense, and they've never had any evidence about that. But systemically, he's among the top 3 most corrupt politicians we've ever had. Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden, because they've taken the most amount of money. And you could put Trump and Hillary Clinton in there as well, and get a top 5, okay?
I just want to say, I'm sorry, and I hope they don't stay on this very long, but any definition of corruption which puts Biden ahead of Donald Trump is just not meaningful.
Do you think that's just divided by the amount of years that they were in public service? Do you think it just wasn't, right? It's just like the raw total, like, here's how much money they have taken over their lifetimes, and Joe Biden comes out ahead because he's been in office for like 60 years? You know what I'm saying?
I maybe. I mean, even then, I'm baffled. But again,
I mean, obviously that is almost certainly true. Staxioms,
yeah. I submit to you that again, any definition of corruption which puts Joe Biden ahead of Donald Trump is just not worth. It's a useless definition altogether.
I mean, Cenk did say, "quote." What did he say? He's like, "quote, Biden is super corrupt." It's like,
maybe not personally. Maybe he's not personally super corrupt, but he's like super corrupt adjacent because he's part of a corrupt system.
Well, right. There's no such thing as a person being systemically corrupt, right?
That's right. Exactly.
It's a weird backpedal from Cenk here, honestly, and I don't know why
Just take the L, man. Just take the L.
Well, he could also take the W and just say, "Oh yeah, like Chad, Biden is corrupt." I don't know why he's backpedaling. Like that's kind of weird.
So strange.
So now, when you talk about pushing Joe Biden, look, some of it is real, but way too little, like rescheduling. Just make marijuana legal nationally. What's wrong with you? You're losing younger.
Wait, what? What do you mean just make marijuana? Listen, I think that's obviously number one. I think that's substantively the right thing to do. I think politically it'd be a genius move. What the hell does he think that Biden can do?
See, that's what I'm trying to say is like, it legitimately feels like people just want a dictator who agrees with them. Like, what do you mean? He has already advocated the DHS to reschedule
to reschedule marijuana
as a class C drug. Yeah. Like, legitimately, what do you want him to do? Like, I feel like it's so weird sometimes because Republicans are like, wow, he really he oversteps the influence of like the presidency, and like he delves into other departments and stuff like that. And these people are like, no, he understeps actually. You know, I want him to actually, with the stroke of a pen, make marijuana legal.
I'm genuinely baffled because Biden he can use, the Department of Justice. He can order them to, again, reschedule marijuana. But at the end of the day, it's illegal by way of federal statute. It's not a proposed federal statute that Biden can veto. It's already been signed into law. He can't just unilaterally,
Well, but if I'm not mistaken, though, as well, like, didn't Biden, I could be wrong on this, but didn't Biden functionally say that basically the federal government wasn't going to enforce this statute? Like, we don't have like people on federal marijuana charges under Biden, and
he also pardoned them all. So yeah, like he basically gave effective orders to DOJ that marijuana prosecutions are not a priority, that the enforcement of weed law that's not gonna be a priority, which he's
just to be
entitled
clear,
do, but,
when for instance, because a lot of people, it's not just about Joe Biden, it's about the Democratic Party as a whole. Just to be clear, when you elect Democrats at the local level, you get marijuana liberalization as well.
For real.
For instance,
yeah.
I live in Southeast Houston. I live in not Southeast Houston. I live in Southeast Texas. I live in Houston. And
prove it. What's your address?
Literally, the election we elected a Democrat to be our district attorney. Guess what happened? We're not enforcing marijuana laws in Texas. It's just not happening. The largest
is high right now. I mean, that's why the E is backwards.
I've got marijuana in my fridge right now. Who gives a shit? No, but seriously, again, there's simply a difference when a person has Democrat, when a person has Republican next to their name on a ballot, right? That does make a difference in the outcomes. Again, like the election that we elected a Democrat to be basically the district attorney for the county. It's kind of a weird title. She immediately basically said, we're not going to enforce these marijuana laws, right? And we're not going to put people in jail for, doing marijuana. We're not going to prosecute it under 4 ounces. And it's like, bro, who's carrying more than 4 ounces of marijuana? It's basically legalized in the county. And, that's a good thing. And that's another reason, like, even if you're stubbornly against Joe Biden and voting for Joe Biden, there's a list of literally probably more than 100 Democrats down ballot that you should vote for and show up for.
Sidebar, stop. I don't know if you can see this, but literally the number of viewers right now I'm seeing is 420, which is just hilarious. I'm sorry.
Perfect timing to that 420th viewer.
That's right.
For voters, it's such an easy layup. 70% of the country agrees. On some of it, though, it's not just weak. It's actually a trick, like the drug prices. You telling me I'm supposed to give him credit for negotiating drug prices on 1 to 10 drugs out of tens of thousands of drugs?
Wait, pause.
Distracting you and pretending that he did.
That was illegal, and that was made legal with the Inflation Reduction Act that he passed. Like, they're going through that process right now because of the legislation that he passed. It's yes, it's 10 right now, but he started that process to make that legal.
I want to play just a little bit more because I'm hoping he corrects himself there, because he said it's a trick. Like, not only is it just weak, like I guess I could understand where he's coming from if he's like 10 is insufficient, but then he says it's a trick as if he's not, he didn't pass legislation which allowed Medicare to renegotiate drug prices. So I'm confused. I'm hoping he corrects himself. This is a really good place to pause, by the way. This would be a good screenshot.
Yeah, it looks good.
Did something while he actually protects 99% of the drug companies and their drugs who are giant donors of his.
I think what David was responding to is that he can't be moved, but he seems to be
No, but
moving
he's
on
not
those
moving
issues.
on the
And
drug
sometimes,
issue.
and those issues are incremental.
No, he's not moving on the drug issue. That whole thing is a scam to protect drug companies. So you don't say out of tens of thousands of drugs, you're going to negotiate price on one. That means you're not doing it. In fact, you've got a cover story.
Okay. So let's just clarify a couple of things here. Oh man, so he actually doesn't correct his math on this at all.
Josiah is triggered by Jank.
Yeah, I am. So the Inflation
Valid.
Reduction Act allows, yes, it is piecemeal, but it's the first 10 drugs that are up for, price negotiation with Medicare. And they were chosen based on the prevalence of the disease that they address, the high cost. Like there was a finely tuned calculus for this. They weren't just 10 random drugs, and it doesn't stop at 10. It's the first 10, then they move to the next 10, and so on and so forth. It's not one drug. It's not 10 drugs. It's going to be, I will say, I don't know how many. I think if I'm not mistaken, the legislation allows for the price negotiation of all drugs used by Medicare. It's just 10 at a time, and you might have beef with that, but whatever. Don't pretend that it's just one or even just 10.
There's this tension sometimes between being an incrementalist and also being like, I don't know how to describe it, but like there's sometimes this opinion where like there's that classic MLK like Birmingham jail thing where it's like, hey, we need to constantly be like the white moderate sucks. We need to constantly be pushing, right? And it's like we do need to constantly be pushing. And anyone who says, hey, let's just take it slow on these kind of things sucks. Yeah. Let's push constantly. But also we need to be incrementalist as well. We can't just say, hey, if it's not 100%, it's not worth doing. Those two positions have to exist at the same time. And yeah, I don't know.
Well, I posted in the show chat that David Packerman's about to come in and make this point that basically like just because it's 10 drugs also doesn't mean that it's like 10 out of 10,000, only a 0.1% difference. Like there's millions of people who take these 10 drugs that are being negotiated on. And obviously that's like billions of dollars of costs that are potentially able to be saved. He talks about in this graphic here, it says that for the number one drug on this list, which is Eliquis, which is, I guess, a prevention and treatment of blood clots, according to this list, there's 3.7 million people that are on this drug at an average cost of $4,500, for their prescription, right? And that's obviously a huge bucket of money for a huge number of people. The impact of just those 10 drugs really can't be understated. And unfortunately, again, this is just an area where, like, for instance, the IRA, is the IRA single-handedly going to turn us carbon neutral tomorrow? Well, obviously not. But is the IRA also the biggest and baddest and most awesomest investment in renewable energy and clean energy technology in the history of the fucking country? Such a radical investment in renewable energy technology that other countries had to pass their own versions of the IRA because of how much fucking money Joe Biden and the Democrats poured into renewable energy, domestic energy production. That's a good thing. That's a radically good thing. And guess how much of that money would have been spent under Trump's administration? Zero.
Yeah.
Zero. Guys, zero. How many drugs were negotiated? How many drugs did Trump pass to negotiate for drug prices? He tried for an entire year of united Republican government to repeal Obamacare. They had healthcare on the mind. Did they ever mention passing a serious bill and negotiating drug costs? Never, not even once.
They made another attempt. They made multiple attempts. They made it with McCain famously when he gave the thumbs down. But even after McCain's death, they tried during COVID. He tried during COVID. They tried to mobilize to repeal the Affordable Care Act during the worst pandemic in a century. That is just how cartoonishly evil this Republican Party has become in terms of its elected officials under Donald Trump. And I want to say in that link that Econoboi gave, in the preamble, it says over the next 4 years, Medicare will negotiate prices for up to 60 drugs covered under Medicare Part D and Part B, and up to an additional 20 drugs. So I don't even know if there is a set total on this. Like, it seems like they're going to just, even if you think it's incremental, even if you think that it should be 70 drugs a year, I don't see where it says a hard limit. Up to 60 drugs in 4 years, and then up to 20 years every year after that, assuming that the IRA isn't repealed. Whatever. Listen, I would love a magic wand in which we all do it in one fell swoop. I'm sure that I'm sure that staggering it out on a schedule like this was one of the conditions by which it passed in the first place. But yeah, it sounds like Cenk just completely mischaracterized this.
And it's also like Cenk has I don't watch a ton of TYT, but I can almost say just assuredly, just knowing his position on things, he has cited how much Americans spend on healthcare and how shitty that healthcare is. And I guess my question is, what is the first step if not this? Like, this is everyone's criticism who knows about healthcare. It's like, wait, why can't Medicare negotiate prices? That's insane. Why is that made illegal? And we ended that. And I just don't know how we can't just have a little victory dance, a little bit of a celebration, then get back to work. I don't know.
Anything else before we continue?
Let's do it. Let's keep going.
Things he has moved a little bit. Student debt's a great example that David puts forward. So these are facts, guys. And on student debt, he's relieved about 10% of the student debt, which is such a classic Obama-Biden corporate Democrat move. 10% is definitely better than 0%. So if I had to vote today, I'm going to vote for 10% rather than 0%.
Okay. All right, Cenk. Go ahead. I know you want to get in. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like, I mean, you know how the government works. Like, when
Don
are we
Lemon
get
is
sweeping?
beside
Like,
himself.
who's gonna sweep in and get like?
It's like, but also
like,
this was his
fucking-
second attempt until it got disqualified by the Supreme Court. It got overturned. Like,
I will say, I mean, listen, I will say, you say Don's beside himself. I'll say from my personal interactions with Don Lemon, because I interviewed him on this channel, I also felt the same way.
I'd make fun of you.
I just wanted to shamelessly.
I'd make fun of you for gloating, but I'm so like.
I just wanted to shamelessly plug. So my late grandmother was basically in love with DonLemon, so like it was like a double,
That's so cute.
really cool moment. I know. Anyway, I digress.
I went to Don Lemon's Thanksgiving party.
You were the giant E in the background of that photo. I saw it 100%. You were the guest of honor, really.
There we go. Exactly.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not saying that was a flex. I just happened to weave it.
No, it was.
I'll be honest with you. I'll be honest with you. I've been like sitting on that since we started playing this video. I was like, how can I like organically just like gently put it in the conversation?
It's like
I interviewed Don Lemon, and then I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna do it anyway.
Yeah, because it's pretty cool.
And pass like Medicare for all and the Green New Deal tomorrow. We have a 51-49 Senate with Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, and yet we've gotten a lot of these things done, things that will have material impacts on people's lives, reasons for people to be able to afford medication that they wouldn't have been able to afford yesterday. Is it everything? Of course not. Is it enough? Of course not. Is it going to take more time? Of course it is. But like to downplay the accomplishments that they've made just because it's not everything seems so like, it just seems so like kind of diluted, and you know how the government works. You know,
and I think in this environment, when you consider who's in the Congress, when you look at the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Matt Gaetzes of the world, and what's happening with the House Speaker, to get done what Joe Biden has gotten done is not. I think it's nothing short of a miracle that he has gotten accomplished.
You have a great opportunity with your platform. I mean, to reach so many people, to be able to use that platform to continue to push him to the left, as we all should. We should push from 10 to 20. We should push for more student loan debt cancellation.
I can't. Wait a minute. I can't believe like the most non-controversial things. I can't believe. I'm shocked. I'll be honest with you. I am shocked that Cenk is choosing to die on this hill. Like even an anodyne point. Like, based on the congressional margins, what Joe Biden has gotten done is impressive. Cenk is denying that. I'm just like, no, it's not impressive. It's like, what? Anyone want to jump in on that?
No, there is like so much of my being does not want to sit on this place where I'm defending. Like no one really wanted Joe Biden to be president. You know, I don't think anyone on this panel really wanted him during the primaries. He was not last on my list, but he was down there.
I've even said like that, even though I think that his first 4 years have been remarkably successful, and I think he'll go down, at least in terms of domestic policy, as being the most successful having the most successful 4-year presidency, assuming he doesn't win the election in modern history. I've even said that I probably would have preferred that he not run again, that he had announced, a year and a half ago that he was going to be a transitional president. And that's how I feel on it. Like, I like the guy, but like, I don't think he's God emperor.
It's like, I really don't want to be on this, like Joe Biden or else or anything. Like there's like, can we live in the real world for half of a second and recognize that this is a massive market improvement and that the Republican Party should we should always vote Democrats over Republicans. And then once we can get there, then we can go, okay, Joe Biden, you gotta pick it up, right? We got to do a little bit more than what you're doing here. But we can't even get there because losers like you, like Cenk, can't even even acknowledge that this is a better world than the last.
I mean, and I don't want. Go ahead, please.
No, I was gonna say, I think, people might get the wrong impression watching this. Like me personally, I don't have a particularly moderate politics.
Right.
I mean, if you listen to my channel and we talk on Three Wonks and stuff about various policies. I mean, look, we released a video about collective ownership. Basically socialist ownership, and at the end it was like, in your ideal society, what proportion of society would be collectivized? And I think I said, I was like, oh yeah, we would definitely collectivize a majority of wealth, and 2/3 of the economic production would probably be from collectivized entities if I had my ideal way, this kind of stuff, right? And I released a full paid for proposal about how theoretically we could have a $3,300 a month UBI, $36,000 a year UBI for everyone. I don't think I'm a particularly moderate person, but again, the point is just to say that even in that context, with those political beliefs, it's just still obviously the case that you'd prefer Biden over Trump. And we're repeating ourselves over and over again because, unfortunately, for a lot of people, they have this stubborn, sort of almost petulance to them, like you said, where it's either basically they are the candidate, which is to say it's a perfectly fitted candidate, or it's just bust, and that's unfortunately a very naive way to go about things.
Yeah, these propositions are not mutually exclusive at all. Again, I think Mehdi Hasan, who's my favorite mainstream progressive political commentator, he's threaded that needle very well, where he's like, listen, even if I'm still disappointed by the president's administration, it's just simply the case because you compare him to what's come before and you evaluate the circumstances in which he finds himself. So when Joe Biden became president, he inherited, again, a once in a century pandemic, an economy that was in the toilet. He inherited a radically hostile Republican Party that had mutated into a cult of personality, a razor thin Senate majority, a 4 to 5 seat or maybe it was 8-seat majority in the House of Representatives. And he got done, despite all of that, enormous legislation, enormous meaningful successes. And I just don't understand this idea that it's almost like to give Biden kudos is it detracts from your progressive bona fides. And I just reject that proposition. And not to talk shit, because I actually like Cenk. That's why I'm kind of surprised. I think he sincerely believes the things that he believes. I find him entertaining. I love the fact that he's so fierce in his beliefs. But it's dude, you haven't run a successful political campaign, let alone govern. You haven't run a lemonade stand. So it's Cenk Uygur could not do what Biden got done based on what not because I think he has the wrong ideas on domestic policy, but because he pushes for things that would require robust legislative margins. He would need more than 60 we haven't had 60 Democrats in the Senate except for the first term of President Obama, and that was for 3 months right before elections came through and he lost it. This idea that I could get it done, seems unlikely. Right. Anything else before we jump
on? The playbook is more complicated than that. And yeah, to Josiah's point, I have watched TYT for 15 years. Okay, I've been watching TYT since I was 12 years old. Okay, it's been a pretty fucking long time, and I extend a lot of charity to Cenk. But obviously, this nonsense about considering voting for RFK or and to be fair, he did say if the polls show that the only viable candidate is Joe Biden, I'll vote for Joe Biden, which is totally fair enough. I mean, that specific criticism I have more for Anna, honestly, who seemed to come out and say, basically I'm committed to not voting for, to not voting for Cenk. I mean, I've been watching her just as long as I've been watching Cenk, right? So just as disappointed. And I think that TYT is the oldest progressive show on the internet. I mean, I can't think of any. Maybe the Majority Report hasn't beat, but I mean, TYT has been around technically speaking since 2002, and they still have a lot of credibility in my eyes. Like, at least their brand equity means something to me. But yeah, man, that's just such a terrible look, honestly, if you ask me. So.
Yeah, I'll throw this in here too, because I like I said, I don't know at what point we'll be able to bring it up, but like I saw a clip of, it was Anna complaining about Democrats in the House, and what it was recently House Republicans proposed a piece of legislation that would rename Dulles Airport in DC after Donald Trump. Right. Now, for context, this is the least productive iteration of Congress since the Great Depression. And the Great Depression met for a fraction of the time. So this iteration of Congress since 2023, when Republicans took the majority in the House, they've met for much longer and have had much more opportunity to pass legislation. And they're just abysmal at it. So House Republicans proposed a bill to rename Dulles after Trump. In response, House Democrats, Jerry Connolly and Jared Moskowitz, who, by the way, I think I'll be interviewing soon as well. That'll be fun. So be on the lookout for that, folks, if you're watching. They proposed a piece of legislation counter to that. Like, listen, if you want Trump's name on a federal building, we will back a bill, and hopefully it'll be bipartisan, to rename a federal penitentiary after Donald Trump just down the road from Mar-a-Lago, which is hilarious, right? So TYT covers this. And Anna both sides it. She says, I can't believe, she's furious. She's pissed. She says, I can't believe this is what Democrats are doing with their time, effort, and energy. And Cenk points out they're not in the majority, right? And by the way, Republicans started it. And she says, I don't care. This is ridiculous. Neither side should be doing this. Democrats should be doing stuff which provide meaningful gains for their constituents. And when I talked with Dan Goldman, Congressman Dan Goldman, about this, man, I am just like, I promise that there's a point to this. He reminded, he's like, listen, we don't have any control over what legislation passes because it's literally Mike Johnson, the Republicans, who control the floor. It's not like they have the ability to pass meaningful legislation, like, again, child tax credits or things like that, and they're choosing to do these stunts instead. The Republicans have made it clear that they will not work bipartisanly or in good faith with Democrats, even on non-controversial issues, because it's an election year, and anything they pass would be seen as a political victory for the president. So my point is, this is where I'm just really baffled by TYT, mostly represented by Anna, not to pick on her too much, which is, she thinks that Republicans and Democrats are basically the same, even when one is in power and doing stupid things and nothing good with that power, the Republicans, and Democrats are not in power, at least in the House, and therefore are unable to do anything meaningful. So I think it's good that Democrats are actually playing tit for tat with Republicans in the House, given that they can't do anything else except basically stick it to them.
I wish that I lived in... I almost wish that, not that I would live in this universe, but I wish I could peer into the universe where somehow Anna becomes president and like she has to navigate these situations herself, right? And it's not to say that it's like, oh, woe is me, like Biden can't do anything. I agree. Biden should do more on many various aspects of his governance, right? I agree with that. And I agree that if somebody like Anna or Cenk were in that position, they would do the more things that I would want them to do in many of the different circumstances. But the idea that you can just hard-nosed negotiate literally everything from a position of zero platform and power, in the case of being the minority in the House of Representatives, in a house where basically it is majority equals 100% control, it's just ridiculous, right? It's like when Cenk, I remember his genius plan to get Republicans to vote on a nominee during Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland. This was his genius plan. This is what he said years and years ago when Republicans were blocking the nomination of Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court. He said, well, I tell you what I would do if I was president. I would literally tell the Republicans, if you don't vote on Merrick Garland, I'm going to nominate Lawrence Lessig, an even more progressive, radical leftist, to be on the Supreme Court. And it's like, Cenk, you're multiplying by zero. Why would they give a fuck? They would just... Like, not only have you made yourself look more radical, they would be running campaign ads about how crazy the nominees you put up are. Yeah. When Merrick Garland was such an uncontroversial nominee, and then they would just tell you no anyway. Right? Yeah. Like this is not a strategy that would yield any results. But for some reason they Cenk and Anna tend to, in my view, really overestimate the ability to harshly negotiate things. I mean, look at Trump. Trump harshly negotiated literally every single thing he wanted as president. How much legislative accomplishments did he get done? He got nothing done.
Right.
Nothing. What he did accomplish was radicalizing the Republican Party in the House, which maybe Anna and Cenk would say that's a good thing. Sure, maybe, right? But at the end of the day, if you care about getting progressive priorities done, it's not about just telling every single person, fuck you, do what I say, or I'm gonna tell the media that you look bad. Trump did that his entire 4 years, and it didn't seem to result in significant outcomes for Republican policy.
It's funny you say that, because this is something else. Like, so there's a duo out there who I really like. I watch their stream as much as I'm able to. It's very rare these days, but they're the Vanguard. Okay, Gavin and Zach from the Vanguard, and they're more progressive than I am, or they're more left than I am, and I consider myself pretty progressive. And they're pretty hard on Biden, particularly after Gaza. And again, understandable reasons. But like we had, we kind of had this back and forth over when they interviewed me over passing certain pieces of legislation, like codifying Roe protections. That's what it was. And they were like, listen, why didn't Biden codify Roe? And I'm like, well, they tried while they still had majorities in both chambers, and it passed the House, but it couldn't pass the Senate because you needed 60 votes to, make it past the filibuster. And Sinema and Manchin weren't willing to break the filibuster in order to pass it. And their point was, well, he should have made them. And it's like, here's my thing.
It's the dictator thing all over again.
Well, so it is and it isn't. So what's interesting is this is where the expression the bully pulpit comes from. There's the idea, and we've seen historic examples of where even other elected officials tend to be intimidated by the president of the United States. And it's understandable. In terms of concentration of power, the president is infinitely more powerful and important than any other single individual actor. Congressman ain't shit, right? But at the end of the day, they actually don't answer to the president. The president is not their boss. They are in a completely different branch of government. The president can't fire Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin really, even though there's a power disparity there, Joe Manchin can and has told Joe Biden to fuck off effectively, right? And there's really nothing that Biden can do about it in terms of firing. Now, you could say, well, he could stick Merrick Garland on Joe Manchin's daughter, or Joe Manchin for like corrupt business practices, et cetera, and so forth. And in theory, that could be done, right? You'd have to get Merrick Garland to cooperate. Joe Biden would have to have the instinct to do that in the first place. I'm not saying that Democrats can't play the game more ruthlessly, but I think it's a reduction. I think it's very reductive and simplified to say, when Cenk or others say Joe Biden can just issue a command, a proclamation, and if he were worth his salt, all Democrats would just fall in line. I don't think that's how it works anymore, especially in today's age, where I feel like reverence for the presidency is not what it was when LBJ was president or when FDR was president. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, Cenk and Anna also, unfortunately, they have this general presumption that the reason the bully pulpit, the reason like the bullying of legislators would be such an effective strategy is because, Americans are actually super duper progressive, right? And the only thing that's missing is somebody to come out and just be progressive and be bold and be in favor of all these policies. The issue with that thinking is obviously that if you were to have line item referenda votes on every single progressive priority, marijuana legalization, to some degree, like liberalizing the criminalization of drugs more broadly, $15 minimum wage, abortion rights, whatever it is, right? You could probably get a majority of the vote in almost every state on almost every one of those issues. So naturally, that leads you to the assumption of, well, why don't people just overwhelmingly vote for progressive Democrats? It's because the character of people on single issue votes is not uniformly the same. People, like, it's a different group of people that majority vote for marijuana legalization, that a majority vote for abortion, that a majority vote for a $15 minimum wage. And when you put all of those policies into the same person, because now all these policies are diversified into a same person, there's a lot of people that say, I want a $15 minimum wage, but I don't want marijuana legalization.
Right.
I want, I want gay rights, but I don't want abortion rights. Now that sounds peculiar to most progressives, but again, 85% of Americans just simply do not think one-dimensionally like this. And at the end of the day, Cenk ran a presidential campaign. He ran a presidential campaign on what he said was, oh, the most easily thing to get elected on. You know, it was like paid parental leave, universal pre-K, and like background checks for guns. It was like all things that polled in like 70, 80, 90%. He got dominated in the Democratic primary. Now you could say, hey, to be fair, it's Cenk Uygur. He's running for president. People weren't even sure if he could legally run. What was his fundraising? He ran for Congress. And raised over $1 million, which anybody with $1 million should be able to run a competitive race for Congress. That's kind of your threshold, is like, if you can get $1 million, you can run a competitive race, especially in a primary for a congressional seat. He got 6% of the vote. 6%. Now you could always say, hey, to be fair, there was a national spirit campaign that was run against Cenk Uygur. That's true as well. But at the end of the day, if you're running for president, I mean, guys, there's a smear campaign against Joe Biden. There's a smear campaign against Donald Trump. There's a smear campaign against AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. These guys were all successfully elected people. Okay, and so we can't always just presume it's all these systemic reasons as to why we lose. Sometimes people just aren't where you are in terms of policy. And that's the thing that I think Cenk and Anna, especially when they talk about this bully pulpit thing, they don't tend to realize, like, guys, America just isn't quite on the same page as you guys. And so given that you want to accomplish these policies and Americans don't necessarily want to accomplish these policies, you have to make compromises. You have to go
100%.
for things that you can get past. Maybe you can't get single payer, but you can get a public option. These are just things that you might have to do in order to improve things, but not get necessarily everything you want.
No, 100%. I think you made a really good point there in terms of like distinguishing, because it is true. I mean, the polling is pretty reliable that progressive policy items are just overwhelmingly more popular than right-wing policy items. But to your point, that's taken in a vacuum, right? That is not a campaign. It's not a progressive campaign.
Yeah, well,
I'm talking about progressive policy items.
Yeah, a perfect example is like how like libertarians are obviously on our side when it comes to abortion, but they're not going to vote for someone who just passed the biggest infrastructure bill in like America's history. Obviously. So, well, I don't know. Obviously, it depends on their calculus on like how exactly they determine those items and weight them. But they are not going to obviously going to vote for Democrats. And I would think, I don't have numbers on this, but I would guess that most libertarians vote for Republicans.
No, I think that again, great example, because growing up in rural Kentucky, I can tell you there are plenty of people out there who would love the decriminalization of marijuana, right? But that's it. That's the only progressive policy that they will back, right? So yeah, I think it's really.
I mean, how many Republicans do we know that say, oh, I like the Democrats' economics, but they're pro-choice, and I'm never gonna.
No, 100%. Abortion is just Yeah,
there's a shitload of people who are just like single issue, and I'm not saying that these people are right. Obviously, I have my ideological leanings. I disagree with them. But the reality is, if you're running for president, you have to get those types of people to vote for you. And obviously, look, I'm not saying you should run as a pro-life candidate, but I am saying, look, if the difference between electing a Democrat and a Republican in a certain district is saying that you're not in favor of abolishing all private insurance, but rather you believe in a public option, that's probably like a reasonable trade-off. Like, I'd rather somebody like that get elected than somebody who's a Republican, obviously, right? And so, that's the trade-off that we have to keep in mind.
I think
but to claim that it's not.
Oh shit.
Oh no, you're
that it
good.
doesn't.
No, wait a minute. I keep clicking the wrong thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And like maybe this is just like a recess, like just I don't want to just repeat everything that's been said, but like fuck. Sorry, I got distracted. Go ahead.
So, listen,
True.
I told people to stop like putting shiny things in front of you because you paw at them like a cat. It's very strange.
Wait, sorry. Now I remember.
Oh, okay.
I know. I'm sorry. No. It's just like it's. I do think that it's important to criticize the system, but I also think that we definitely need to take the time to recognize when the problem is legitimately the American people. I think that I'm in a conservative state right now, and I am called a communist every single time I go over to my fiance's house. Every single one of them call me the communist, and then I like jump on a little bit of Cenk's Twitter circle, and they cut a liberal, a fascist bleeds, and I'm like, whoa, I need to there is some huge disconnect happening between these two groups of people.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the only other thing I'll say is I do sympathize. I empathize with Cenk on certain things, certain fecklessness coming from the Democratic Party. I'm not saying it's entirely without merit. Easy example that I go to all the time, and we're seeing the pain of it right now. So Donald Trump, one of Donald Trump's federal cases, is being presided over by Judge Aileen Cannon, who is a Trump appointee. And the only reason that happened was because when the classified documents case, which is a bit of a misnomer in the first place, when it went into the wheel to be assigned to whichever district judge in Florida, there are 2 or 3 vacancies in Florida, which means it reduced the number of potential judges, increased the probability that case would land in front of Cannon. The reason that there are vacancies on the court in Florida are because Republicans are blocking President Biden's judicial appointments using an informal system. It's an old system. It's not nowhere in the Constitution, called the blue slip. And it's basically like if I, President Josiah, want to put a federal judge in Senator Hunter's state, then he can say, listen, I support that or I reject it. You can basically de facto veto. And what have Rick Scott and Marco Rubio, the Republican senators of Florida, done? They've just vetoed every single one of Biden's appointees. Now, Democrats, because they're in the majority on the Judiciary Committee, could shred that damn rule anytime they wanted. As a matter of fact, Republicans under Trump in 2017 did that for judges, for I think it was circuit judges, just so they can cram those vacancies through, and Democrats couldn't do shit about it. But Democrats, because we have this instinct in us to be losers when we really need not be, we've just like, well, if we do it, then like, what if they, I don't know, do something else when they take power? They're going to do it anyway. And I understand not immediately going to rip that tradition apart, but we're 4 years in, we're now reaping the rewards. Take the damn blue slips off and cram every communist judge you can possibly find in every red state just to piss them off.
Right.
But that's something that Cenk would say, we're feckless losers. And I agree, in this particular area, we are feckless losers. And that's why I crave, for a Dan Goldman or a Jasmine Crockett or whatever to eventually make their way to the Senate to say, we're not doing that anymore. We're not going to tear down everything just for the sake of it. But if Republicans are willing to change institutions, we will change them too, because we have better ideas and better values. If we're going to maintain institutions, it has to be reciprocal. And if we're going to change institutions, then God damn it, we're going to change the institutions too when it makes sense. Sorry.
No, I appreciate that. Speaking of shiny things in front of me, there's some really interesting comments. I want to ignore everything that you said and then go on a little bit of a tangent on something that I saw in the comments. So someone said rightly, people are for Medicaid for all until you ask if they're okay with private insurance being limited.
Wait, where is this? I'll put it up there.
It was a while ago. I've been following this comment for a little, maybe about a minute or two.
Okay.
This was at
set something off in Staxioms.
No, for real. No, but I think it's so interesting. I think it is so encapsulates like what
I'm still going to look for it. What did it say? Read it again.
People are for M4A, which is Medicare for all, until you ask if they're okay with private insurance being eliminated. Then support is cut in half. Then someone responded, private insurance would not go away. Why would it be cut? And then another person said, do not go into a plan with Medicare without consulting someone who knows what they are telling you. It's okay, but other plans will leave you without health care. And I think what I really want to point out is this is a very educated audience who are watching us, who are more educated than I would say the average American, who are tuning in for things like politics. And they are not aware that a single payer, like the differences between a single payer and a universal healthcare option are. Like a lot of people were making fun of Biden because he was like, no, I'm for universal healthcare. And they're like, then why would you strike down Medicare for all? And it's like, do you know what a single payer system is? Like, do you know the complications of all of this? And sometimes you really can't trust polling because it depends on how exactly things are worded. This is
why everyone in the chat should subscribe to 3 Wonks on YouTube.
Exactly.
We have a succinct video where we go through every healthcare system on the planet and explain the intricacies and differences.
That sounds so cool, actually.
Yeah.
No, honestly, I think no, it is on YouTube. Yeah, 3
I might actually, I might watch it.
No, I mean, but that does speak to a broader point where like there's obviously like messaging strategy on both sides, right? Where like I'm trying to think of, I'm sure there's examples on the, well, I mean, pro-life is an example of that. Like I'm not anti-choice, I'm pro-life, right? So obviously there's like strategy there on both sides to try and effectuate change. And like, obviously for a progressive, it's easier to call something Medicare for all because you get the branding of Medicare, an overwhelmingly popular program. But actually, we're not just like making literally Medicare available for everyone. It's a single payer healthcare plan where we abolish private insurance. Like, that's a way to brand it. And so, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, again, people aren't policy wonks. People.
Right. And I'm not trying to criticize the audience. I'm just saying, like, this is the realistic look at this. This is how Americans deal with these issues and understand these issues. And a lot of people still get surprised that Medicare for all would abolish private insurance.
Ben, for the person in the chat, Ben, you're being a dumbass right now. Okay, listen to what we're saying. All right. Did private schools go away because public schools exist? Okay, when I say you're being a dumbass right now, I mean it from the bottom of my fucking heart. Okay, from the bottom of my soul, I mean it, because what I just described was the exact intricacy of saying I'm in favor of Medicare for all, because Medicare as a program that exists is not the same thing as Medicare for all, where progressives say they are going to get rid of duplicative insurance, which is another way to say we're abolishing private insurance. So obviously you can have a public option healthcare plan, which people like Biden endorse, which people like Buttigieg endorse, which I think Kamala was a single payer person, but that was a debate in the Democratic primary. But obviously there's a difference between those plans, and people just don't tend to understand them, unfortunately, right? And that's kind of what we were speaking to. So,
yeah, I 100% agree.
He says, I think he's saying that that was in support of both. It was a rhetorical comment.
No, I think no. I think I think
I think.
Oh, come on!
But no. Wait, hold on. Metaphorically, we are currently in a public option of how we use schools, how we use education. A Medicare for all would look like private schools would be abolished.
That's wait a minute. I see what Ben is saying. Ben was making a satirical comment. He was like basically quoting the opposition.
He was joking, guys. Are you serious?
This is the Schrodinger's asshole. Have you guys ever heard that?
Oh my!
See, this is where Econoboi This is where Econoboi has become so cynical.
See, I blame my autism for that.
That he just assumed that
I have a disability.
Yeah. So Ben, we apologize.
Ben, maybe you're not a dumbass, okay? Maybe you're all right. Maybe you're fine. I blame my autism and also the Republicans somehow for that outvoice.
See, that's what it is. You know what it is, Econoboi? You're too cynical. You need to be more of an optimist and a trusting and inviting person like myself.
True.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep going.
All right.
Let's
make some progress
it seems
here.
just like not the right way to go about doing this. Use your platform to keep pushing.
Again, let's be super clear. I never said nothing, and I clarified this. I'll clarify it now. I clarify it on the show all the time. So, for example, one of the best things that Joe Biden did was he put in a 15% minimum corporate tax. That's a great policy, and I love that policy. And I'm fair and honest about all of these things. So 10%, like I said, on student debt relief is a lot better than what Trump did or would ever do. He goes backwards on all of these issues. So I know that, and I clarify that to the audience all the time. But don't come and tell me that 10% is good enough. Give me a pat on the head and move on. No, I'm not giving him a...
That's not what he's saying. He didn't say that. He didn't say give a pat on the head. He said you should continue to push it along.
Yeah, no, but guys, how's that working out for us? One drug? So at this rate, we're going to take, 10,000 years or 200,000 years to negotiate drug prices on all drugs. I'm tired. No, this is really important. I'm tired of a Democratic leader that we have to beg to do democratic things. We constantly are begging and pleading with Democratic leaders to do the things that they promised. How about they stop lying to us and actually goddamn do it? Here, I'll give you a great example. We're not talking about Green New Deal or Medicare for All. Brian, I know those are not realistic at this time, and I want to work towards making them realistic. But when you talk about $15 minimum wage or voting rights, those are super realistic, and they chose not to do them. They chose.
One at a time.
You know why those didn't pass. You know that Kirsten Sinema curtsied and voted it down. I mean, what are you supposed to do other than short of taking Kirsten Sinema out there and turning her thumbs down into a thumbs up?
David,
these people are advocating for certain things. We have immovable Democrats, corporate Democrats, that those should be the targets of your ire, because it's the Kirsten Sinemas and the Joe Manchins. And by the way, these systemic blocks against having any type of reasonable democratic governance or representation in the Senate, in the House. We need to pass a Voting Rights Act so that we're not completely gerrymandered out of power. That's where the issue lies. But we can't do any of that. not like giving Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, who are very clearly and plainly the cause of these problems, a pass, and just saying that, oh, it's all of the Democrats, actually redounds to their benefit.
Can you imagine if they were the majority? Can you imagine if you had a Republican in the White House? No, not a Republican, I should say. Can you imagine if you had a Donald Trump in the White House and you have the members of Congress and some of the members of the Senate now? Go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to make a point about the drug stuff. I don't think it's good to oversell or undersell this stuff. And while Cenk is clearly right that there are 10,000 drugs out there, the reason that those 10 drugs were selected was on the basis of how many people use them. And so, yes, many of those drugs have a few hundred or a few thousand people that use them. Remember the whole Martin Shkreli thing. Not defending Martin Shkreli, but the drugs that were in question there are used by very few people. So the selection of the 10 drugs is both a starting point and it's strategic because of the number of people using them. And to say it's 10 out of 10,000 kind of misses the significance of it, in my view.
Yeah. Here's how I feel about this. And I think it's very simple, and I'm sure you've thought about it before. I look at politicians and politics as public transportation. They're never going to get you. They're never going to take you to your house like a chauffeur, right? Or you drive your car in your garage. They're going to take you to the bus stop or the train stop that is nearest to your home. And that's what I'm voting on. Someone who is the closest, who gets me the closest to the policies that I find important. And in this particular era right now, that is the Biden administration. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat. I'm an independent. But the only side now that's looking out for democracy happens to be Democrats, and the one who's in the White House and the one who has the best chance of winning again is Joe Biden, whether we like it or not, and it's not perfect. And that brings me to the next thing, because currently, Brian, the poll.
Before we go to the next thing,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that I don't understand how the obvious logical conclusion is that we need more Democrats so that we don't have to placate to some random fucking West Virginian senator. Like, we need more Democrats. We don't have to listen to all of the moderates anymore. I don't understand how we don't all come to the same conclusion after Sinema curtsied during the minimum wage vote. And
what you don't understand is that it would have been so easy to make her go, I don't know. And he didn't clarify. That's why I'm so confused. Like, what do you mean it's so easy? I wish it were easy.
And just to be clear, like, Kyrsten Sinema specifically was under immense pressure to change her position from virtually every side.
Yeah,
she had a credible primary challenge. He wasn't announced at the time, but he was known to be a primary challenger against her, Ruben Gallegos, who was polling at 75% in the primary. Okay, she had a representation of a swing state, right? She had pretty much everyone, because again, she was on an island on a lot of these situations. Almost the whole Democratic caucus, establishment, progressive Democrats against her on this. She's just, fucking a piece of shit and didn't want a lot of the shit that
That's
Biden
a technical
wanted.
Phrase, by the way. That is a.
Well, no, I mean, it's just people are so quick. I mean, again, people are so quick to ascribe like this like conspiratorial like motive to people like Kyrsten Sinema. Now with Joe Manchin, look, I mean, Joe Manchin, whatever you want to say about him, he represents a coal state, West Virginia, that voted 100%. For Trump, but like 70%, whatever. I'm just not surprised that he's a more conservative Democrat.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, with Kyrsten Sinema, do not pretend that there was not immense pressure to get her from all sides to change her position. Definitive empirical electoral pressure. Like, you will lose your job if you don't do these things. And obviously internal establishment pressure, because Biden proposed the thing that she was against. Biden wanted her to change her opinion, and everyone was telling her to change her vote on this. She just didn't. Like, sometimes, like,
yeah, but
she's just not in favor of certain things.
My question is that why didn't Joe Biden try to talk with her? Oh, he did. He 100% did and tried to negotiate his way out.
Yeah,
of it.
I mean, it's weird because people will say, like, on one end of the side, we have people who say that, politicians are just bought and sold. But then at the same time, they'll say this person's evil, right? They just believe in crazy, evil things. And it's like, well, I don't really know how you could believe in both of those things at the same time, right? Like, Kyrsten Sinema is somebody who, by all accounts, basically just didn't believe in the things that Biden was proposing. Or at the very least, she had like very specific reasons as to why she was against them. She had immense pressure, and she just didn't change her mind. Like, guys, I don't think a hard-nosed approach would have really worked here.
I don't know. I guess I am inclined to believe that there was. I don't know if you call it nefarious, but the reason, it's precisely for the reasons that you say, that people want to know what the hell's going on with. I don't know if it was a principled objection.
Well, it's like,
because
if it's financial.
Well, I was going to say she campaigned as a progressive, and then just very quickly.
But she's also not up for re-election. So, like, what was it?
Well, she's already announced she's not seeking re-election. It's now between Carrie Lake and Ruben Gallego.
That's my point, though.
That's my point.
Like, unfortunately, even if it were the case that, and Kristen Sinema's just a weird person. There was that bizarre story about how she was like an intern at a wine vineyard over the summer as a sitting U.S. senator. Like, what is going on there? There's obviously something weird going on. The point is just to say that at the end of the day, she had a lot of pressure, both vitriolic and more sort of cordial pressure to change her vote. She just didn't. Right. So I just, again, like the playbook of Cenk of like, oh, just embarrass her, just make her politically unpopular. Kristen Sinema was one of the most politically unpopular fucking politicians in the goddamn country, and she didn't change her vote.
Moreover, I'll say this, listen, because I do think there is room for strategic spite in professional politics. I think
obviously that's true.
No.
Right. So if Cenk took the position that Sinema should be humiliated or politically punished somehow for her defiance, I'm open to that. My problem is he pitches it, and others have pitched it as it's not punishment, it's not retribution for bucking the party and screwing over Americans. He makes it sound like you could have just made her, like if he came out and said, listen, I concede based on everything I've seen, there's no way that Biden can push Sinema on this and make her do what he wants, but he should force some sort of political penalty for. I'm open to that. Hell yeah!
Look, just to be clear, I'm super petty. Here's what I would do. I'd love. I know.
Believe me, we saw poor Ben here in the chat. He saw how fucking petty you are.
Look, he caught a stray. That was just a stray, though. What I would do, I would throw a
You're
big
not nearly
gala.
high enough.
Exactly. I would throw a big gala for all the elected Democrats in Arizona and like purposefully not invite Kristen Sinema or something like that. Like it would be like, I would be super petty about it. Because I mean, to be fair, if we're not going to get her vote anyway,
no, for real,
petty, right?
Well,
100%.
Well, and this is also where, though, I say that I would be petty, but there's also the fact that she still caucused with Democrats far more often than not, as did Manchin. So my position on Sinema has been this: I'm glad she's not seeking re-election, and I agree she should have been primary to hell and back. And that's probably part of the reason why she elected not to run for re-election, because she knew she was fucked and she didn't earn enough goodwill from Republicans by screwing over so much of Biden's agenda that they would vote for. Like Republicans, if they're given a choice between Kyrsten Sinema and Carrie Lake, they're going to vote for Carrie Lake, right? So she found herself with a foot basically in both worlds, and she paid the price for it. And I'm glad, because fuck her, right? But I will also say I was happy to take her vote on the non-Build Back Better stuff, and that she was willing to vote. And same thing with Manchin. Like my thing is that, Democrats should always try to make the centrist Democrats a surplus and treat them and almost go back to high school in the sense that bully them. Like you want to make it so that they're the loser kids who sit at the lunch table by themselves and go through 4 years of high school in absolute misery. Do that to them by electing more Democrats who will sit with you at the popular kids table, and you can make fun of those other two. And if they're like, well, we'll go sit with it, and you're like, well, nobody cares. We still win no matter what because we don't need you. Make them a surplus and then be vicious and cruel. That's what I wanted. Unfortunately, we may very well lose the Senate. We've got like 8 seats that we have to defend. We have no margin for error. I think the most competitive seat that we've got to potentially flip is Texas. And I don't know, man. I mean, like I've seen some polls to say that Allred is within a reasonable different distance of Cruz. And Cruz is legendarily unlikable. I'll throw that in there too. Like Lindsey Graham said publicly, you could murder Ted Cruz on the floor of the Senate, have the trial in the Senate, and nobody would convict you. And that's coming from Lindsey Graham. No. Right. But I mean, it's not looking good. It's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to go on that rant on just being mean to Republicans and centrists. Because, by the way, I'll just say again, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, it's better than a Republican being in those seats. And that's the other thing.
For sure, which is why it's so hard to like criticize Manchin, because he's the only Democrat who could get elected there. But Sinema, bro, so many Democrats could have filled that position.
I want to throw this in here too, Nanette. said, I think this is it's she's got her own YouTube channel. This is the one I'm thinking of. She's really funny. She says cinema change, and that chick in North Carolina was elected as a Democrat and switched to Republican, giving them the supermajority. Yeah, you're referring to Tricia Cotham. That woman is pure evil. She ran as a progressive pro-choice. No, I'm serious. Like without hyperbole,
But after
I'm saying she
that
is up there
woman
with
is Hitler.
no, even Hitler would have been like, this is ridiculous.
even Hitler.
Even Hitler. Okay. She campaigned as a pro-choice progressive in Mecklenburg County, which includes part of Charlotte. She was elected. It's like 4 months after she was seated in 2023, she switched party affiliation to Republicans, gave them a veto-proof supermajority.
Yeah.
And did not have the dignity to resign from office. There's no recall function here in North Carolina. I mean, scum of the earth. And then backed a super aggressive abortion ban here in North Carolina. Pure evil. Okay.
Yeah,
Naturally,
I mean, the timing of everything makes that specific situation seem very sus. like she might have just literally been like a paid, actor or something who like by the Republicans or something. Like it's very odd to fucking 180 your political ideology like that in such a short span of time after getting elected.
she said, she goes, the Democrats are too mean. Just like, and by the way, can we just like let go of this thing that I'll be frank with you. I don't think we're mean enough. I'll be honest with you. I get so tired.
Because Republicans are so fucking historically nice. Like
right. I'm so tired of this.
It's so tiring. It's so like, what are we fucking talking about anymore? What are we talking about?
100%. If
I can't even. There's not even a response anymore to this. It's like, what are we talking about? What are we saying?
Yeah, I get triggered all the time. Like, so my favorite Fox News political commentator is Jessica Tarlov, and she is on maternity leave. So they got their new token liberal, Piers Morgan, is taking her spot. And I don't know if you guys know this.
Classic
I was
liberal.
kind of surprised, but Piers Morgan, in his 2 episodes on The Five, has agreed basically with every other thing that the 4 Republican hosts have said. And the thing that I keep hearing from him and so many centrists and conservatives are how elitist and condescending Democrats are, and how we really need to understand the Trump voter and the Republican. But I never hear that shit going in the opposite direction. I've never read a single fucking op-ed or an essay from Fox News about how Republicans should go to blue cities and blue states and try to understand the Democrat because there's more of us. I just don't. Why is it? Why do we have to always go to them? Why is there no reciprocal obligation to understand and try to court us? I don't get it.
I don't know. I had this weird predilection where when I, hear of a 12-year-old who was raped, I just think to myself, the best thing for that 12-year-old probably isn't having the rapist's child and being forced to do so by the state. It's just a weird thing. Guys, I don't know if it's just I grew up in this crazy conservative community, Yeah,
but you're so uncivil about it, Econoboi. Be more polite.
You don't have to shout about it. You don't have to shout about it.
I grew up in a radical communist community known as Southeast Texas, where we just learned that was just wrong. I don't. It was a weird thing in our community, I guess specifically, but maybe it's because of all the immigrants in my community. That's why.
Jesus.
Yeah, the immigrants are like historically liberal on that kind of stuff.
It's just bizarre. I mean, obviously, any Republican who says, "Look, I mean, she's part of a party that is endorsing a Holocaust denier to be their governor now."
Right.
Okay, so I don't take seriously she's part of a party who are endorsing a man that says she should not have the right to vote. Okay, so I mean, the idea that the party of civility, the party run by a man who cheated on his wife while she was pregnant with a porn star, and tried to pay her hush money to cover it up, and he's currently on trial for that because that's illegal. The idea that this is the party of civility. when the worst thing you could say about Joe Biden is he's awkward with his granddaughter in public or something. Like, come on, guys.
Well,
Like,
but
fucking get real
remember,
here.
and I think we talked about this. You remember how they flipped their freaking lids when Biden in that Independence Hall speech in 2022 or 2023 said MAGA Republicans, and they clutched their pearls and tipped over in their chair like, how dare the president of the United States be so divisive? And it's like, really? Well, the difference is Joe Biden said he was going to be a president.
The difference is Donald Trump never had red lighting behind him. So that's what made him, that was the nail in the coffin for him.
I'm so tired. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is, and I'm not saying it's productive. Maybe it's true. And I've said this before. If people can show me empirical evidence that it can't work for Democrats, that there's something cosmically imposed on us that if we act like total pricks, it's a cheat code, it's a hack that Republicans get that we don't, fine. Because at the end of the day, I just want to win elections. And if that requires me to be super nice and Republicans get to talk all the kinds of shit they want, as long as I win and they lose, who cares? But I am not convinced that it is impossible for Democrats to just like raise the rhetorical aggression a bit and still win. I think.
Well, I think Biden has been a little bit more aggressive on Trump recently, like calling it. What was that report where you like called him scumbag? Yeah.
Well, no, he's so that is reportedly Trump's least favorite word, and Biden has been using it strategically.
Yeah,
every chance he gets, loser. I mean, and his campaign, the Biden campaign on the social media, have been brutal, and I love it.
One of the funniest, like when I think of like political strategies, it's like, have you considered that this person is such an petulant, like a petulant toddler that you can just piss him off so much that he'll explode? Is such a funny strategy to me, and it like fair, like that's who you elected. So
I'll give you an example too. So Marjorie Taylor Greene during the House Oversight Committee hearings, of course, where they were trying to impeach the president, she pulled out that poster-sized image of that explicit image of Hunter Biden.
Yeah, his penis.
Remember that?
Yeah.
So
I
forget?
No, I've tried not to forget it because it was a nice little juicy one. So I just
So 2 hearings.
I hung it up in my bedroom actually.
2 hearings later, something in the news had come up about Jeffrey Epstein again. I think like the flight logs had been deciphered or whatever. So Jared Moskowitz, a Democrat from Florida, made a poster board twice as big as the one Marjorie brought in, and it was one of those viral pictures of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump hugging each other, which is an actual photo. It happened because they used to be friends. And so he just had it in the background during his 5 minutes. And he didn't even say anything about it. He just made sure that it was there and that the cameras were on it.
That's not half enough.
But why can't we be kinder?
No,
exactly.
He should have had an entire suit made of just that image over and over and over again, where we just saw that image on his whole suit. And then he had the poster in the background as well. That's the kind of radical Democratic Party that I want. You know, they're not
for real
far enough.
And it's like at times like this, I'm like, no, I really do want to be so much more radical than we are. You know, and that was like to the point where it's like, dude, I'm not content with Joe Biden. I'm not like, oh well, that's good enough. You know, I don't want to sit back and just say, oh yeah, the IRA, we're fine on climate change now. But like when these people just say, no, we should vote for Trump instead, it's like, like now I'm forced in this weird position of like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's, I don't know.
No, I agree. Let's do this. Let's take some comments here and then we'll wrap up so I can eat and Econoboi can see his wife and you can again beg your fiance not to come to her senses, Stax, and
unchain her from the basement.
Yeah. So let's see. Ed Livewire. Republicans complain about cancel culture, but they're the ones banning and burning books. They're the ones canceling women's rights to health care and bodily autonomy. They're the ones who complain woke. Yeah, I can't read it. Again, grew up in rural Kentucky.
That's such a funny way to phrase it. Like, you're complaining about us canceling you for saying the N-word on Twitter, but you're canceling all of women's rights as we
You're canceling women's anatomy.
That's right.
Oh my God, Jesus.
Were there other, let's see, there are a gazillion comments here. Was there one that anybody wanted to address? And I will pull it up.
Surprisingly, Josiah, your stream is pretty agreeable to what we're saying. So
I know the way it should be. Well,
It's
it
almost
could be
like-
concurrence. Oh, again, we haven't heard from Ben ever since you called him a dumbass, and
Yeah, true.
I'm glad he's
exiled him.
gone. Frankly,
Stop it. You stop that.
I'm low-key not convinced he's joking. I'm not convinced.
You stop that. Ben and I go way back.
But
versus
like,
joking.
I could be wrong. I'm not gonna.
The
I've been to
dark
Ben's house.
The
Not
dark
with his
progressive
knowledge, to be fair, but
The dark progressive says a loser says absolute presidential power when he is not the president. This is the other thing I just find so fucking gross. I mean, I've ranted about, so I'm asking you two. What do you think? Is it not like un-American and unpatriotic, just from a right-wing perspective? This idea that the president is sovereign and should be given absolute, isn't that like fucking gross?
look,
No,
it is
for
an
sure.
American tradition to overthrow your government and replace it with a better one. Okay, that's how we were born as a people. And so, look, obviously, we shouldn't. I'm a very anti-elitist person, and it's certainly gotten me in trouble in some contexts in my own life. But like, I just don't think you should never hold anybody to be above anybody else just because of their position. These are people. And I, to the extent that I don't even necessarily like it when people say, this, you think this and that about me, but you'll respect my office. It's like, bro, I'm not talking to the office of the president. I'm talking to a fucking person who his job title is president, and you're not better than me. And, there's no reason for me to give you some unbelievable amount of respect. Look, I respect everyone. You don't have to be the president to get respect from me. Right. And to the extent that I'm disrespecting you, of course, it's because I feel like you're not a person worthy of respect. I mean, I can't imagine meeting Donald Trump and shaking his hand just because he's a president or used to be a president. I mean, I would much quicker tell him to fuck himself. Right. I mean, it's just certain people are, no matter what their historical position's been, are just not worth civil conversation.
Sure, but that's your respect, Econoboi. That's your respect. I understand that you want to be frugal with it, but that has nothing to do with absolute immunity. I mean, like, listen, you can treat somebody just like everybody else, but
Guys.
also indemnify them, make them above the law.
Make them permanent president.
Yeah.
Abolish
Exactly.
the Constitution. Easy.
There are shiny jingling keys in the comments.
First respond to this. What do you think of absolute presidential immunity?
Absolute presidential immunity. That there's nothing more American than that, baby. Ford was in the right, actually. Who cares if Nixon lied and crimed his way in the White House? Who the fuck cares? That's what being in power means.
I really don't understand how this isn't getting more play. I mean, Trump. Because it's not like a joke. Like, Trump is actively in the court system right now, arguing that basically the president literally cannot commit a crime, in the sense that the only way to hold him accountable for anything is basically if the internal party members have the political will to formally impeach him.
That's
right?
if they know he committed there's so many issues with this. Like, even if we grant that, which, by the way, Trump's attorneys during his second impeachment argued that you can't impeach him after he leaves office. So they said one thing when it was convenient, then said the exact opposite years later when that was convenient. But even if we grant that, that requires the parties in question to know about the criminal offense to impeach in the first place. What if we don't find out about the legal violation until 2 years after that person leaves office? Or what if, as the more extreme examples go, the president just kills a sufficient number of lawmakers to either prevent impeachment or prevent conviction? I mean, just so.
Well, I mean, I'd be interested. I mean, the court, the court might, if the court rules, I really don't think the court will rule in favor of this extreme argument that basically the only way to hold accountable the president, or especially a former president, is basically through impeachment. If they were to hold such a thing to be true, that would legitimately destroy the country. I like that. If the Supreme Court held that to be true, and then Trump got elected a second term, I'd leave the country. I would flee the country if that was the case. Like, it would be
sorry, real quick. I know I'm getting so distracted. There's shiny jingling keys in the comments. Real quick question, Ben. I just want to be so clear about something. I have a question for you, and I would like you to answer it.
Oh, here we go. Listen, be nice to Ben.
No. It's a genuine question. I really want you to answer it, and like try not to use any like rhetorical anything. Genuine question: if Medicare for all were implemented, would private companies be banned? Okay, I want to come back to this after he responds, but continue with your conversation.
Yeah, we're only talking about petty things like absolute, like how we have an aspiring fascist dictator in the making who's literally arguing in front of his right-wing.
Okay, fuck. Econoboi, you were so right. He wasn't joking. He said joking to mean he was saying a metaphor. Okay, you were so fucking right.
Thank you.
You were so fucking right this entire point.
I was right.
This guy, Ben, was a fucking idiot. Oh my god.
Stacks. Wait,
no, it's so frustrating sometimes. It's like, no. Oh, yes, it would be.
I'm sure Ben is fine.
Yes, it would be. Yes, it would be banned. That is what Medicare for all is. That's what single payer means, is that they are the only payer who does it. You are thinking of public options. And this is our entire point about how people misunderstand what universal healthcare is. Listen, sorry. I got so distracted. I'm so sorry.
All you need to do to fill this gap in your knowledge, Ben, is
to subscribe to the 3 months. Here we fucking go. This fucking guy.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. If people want us to lay it out, I'm so happy to, because I think private insurance is very interesting.
Could you just lay it out in a nicer way?
Well, someone said it so instead of calling him an idiot, lay it out. It's like fair.
Let's be nice.
Subscribe to the 3
here we're mean to conservatives, not our fellow liberal / progressive whatever Ben is, an ally. Okay, we have to you have to educate Ben on what your point is. Not be mean to him. Okay?
I'm sorry.
Can you do that?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
Universal healthcare is an umbrella term. There are 2 main subsets under that umbrella.
I'm holding
first
an umbrella.
is
I am Rihanna.
That's universal healthcare. One of them is public option. The other is single payer. Single payer is sometimes called Medicare for all, or Medicare for all is a type of single payer. Single payer requires insurance to be, saying that everyone would be forced into the public option. It would be under a single payer. That's what I'm saying. Econoboi, could you help me out?
Well, again,
are you seeing this? If I'm harping on this too much, we can go back to the other conversation. I am sorry. I didn't.
Also, I mean, this is just where the confusion,
monstrous piece of shit.
The confusion comes in because Medicare as a program that currently exists doesn't sort of require the elderly to only be on Medicare, right? Like in theory, like an elderly person doesn't have to be on Medicare, right? I mean, you could have your own insurance. Like, fucking Bill Gates is probably not taking advantage of his Medicare eligibility, right? But that's the thing. Like when somebody says, that's why I say Medicare for all is like a branding term, because when somebody says Medicare for all and they're like a Democratic Socialist progressive, they mean single payer. They don't mean just taking the Medicare eligibility age down to 0. Now, somebody like Biden would say that. Biden would say, my Medicare for all is just allowing you to purchase a public insurance plan, which is what Medicare, currently is, right? So that's where the confusion comes in.
It reminds me of, there was this beautiful interview that I think about all of the time. And it's like of these rural, really poor white people from like Appalachia. And they're like, why would you not vote for Obama? And they're like, fuck Obamacare, right? And then they were like, okay, what insurance are you on? And they're like, the ACA.
Yeah, they're on Medicaid, right? Yeah, I mean, it's obviously dumb. I mean, but that's why branding is so important.
No, 100%. Like, I'm not trying to demean it. I'm trying to let's highlight this to make sure that we understand how important branding is and how just looking at a fucking poll is not where the country is.
Well, listen, this was fascinating. I'm going to call it because we have now officially tested. The internet is working. It is stable. And I'm going to go stuff my face.
I love you.
But listen,
I love you, Ben. I really do.
Ben hates you. Ben is.
It's valid. If you want to be frustrated, that's fair. But I do think that I am right and you are misunderstanding me. But that is okay.
Yeah. So listen, I'm glad we did this. This was fun. I'm really frustrated by I shouldn't say everything, but by most of what Cenk had to say in that thing. I'm going to watch the rest of it and hopefully it gets better. Like I mean, it was good, but hopefully they come to a consensus in a way that unites the left against Donald Trump. And from the sounds of it, your silence anyway.
Yep.
That's not what happens.
I mean, a lot can change, right? It's only April, right? So there's another 7 months before the election. So literally anything could change. I'll be interested to see what the polling is if Trump is convicted, because supposedly, if Trump's convicted, there's a 10-point swing in people on the margin who say if he is convicted of even one of these crimes, we will overwhelmingly decide to vote for Biden. We'll see if that comes true, because I think that the trial in New York might actually be over before the election. So we will see if he's convicted, how people change their opinions. But we might have the first convicted president running.
God, don't say
That's
that.
crazy.
Yeah, don't say that.
Dude, I was talking to Rob Norton. He was like, technically there was another convicted president. You looked it up, and it was like he got
Ulysses
like,
S.
he
Grant.
got like
Ulysses S.
2,000
Grant
votes.
got like, oh, I thought you meant Ulysses S. Grant, who
No,
was,
he
was a
some
former
person,
president.
It was
he
like,
got a speeding ticket at some
Speeding
point.
ticket.
no,
Yeah.
oh, gotcha.
I mean, obviously
right.
that's pretty stupid, but
Wait, hold
it's
on,
fun,
real
guys.
Real quick, put in the comment, send us somewhere to grow our knowledge, because I have 3 YouTube channels that I would suggest you to. The first is Econoboi, the second is Staxioms, and the third is Pondering Politics.
I appreciate
Wow,
that.
it's a little plug.
I was waiting for you. I was waiting for you
In
to be
that
like-
order.
I was
if
waiting
might
for you
add.
to be like the third
True.
one is, hey, what's up, Adam? I was waiting for you to say the third one was the 3 wonks or something like that. The Young
Yeah,
Turks.
fuck you.
Leave me out of it. All right, guys. I appreciate you helping me test this. Thank you. You all have a really good night, and thanks to chat
Absolutely.
for participating, including apparently the people on Twitter, which is where we got the most eyes on it. So yeah.